Hello and welcome to Purely Academic, your potentially educational podcast for the month of April 2025. I'm Dr. Jonathan Lack. I write about movies. I teach cinema studies at the University of Colorado, and I have had it with these motherfucking fascists in my motherfucking government.
And I'm Sean Chapman, high school English teacher by day, otaku by night, and I'm in the market for a good shovel so I can go bury all my money and precious belongings in a hole out there somewhere, because that seems to be the move to do these days.
Yeah, Sean, do you have any money in the stock market? I do not.
I've got like a retirement thing that is there, which luckily I don't have to obviously pull anything out of that for a long time, or possibly ever, depending on how things go. But yes, I don't have much money in the stock market.
Well, what's funny, Sean, is so I had not had any retirement savings until this year, because now I have a job that has those benefits, and I had to choose between, you could do like a standard 401k, which would put your money in some kind of stock market associated fund, or in Colorado, you can be part of PARA, the Public Employees Retirement Association, and I didn't know anything about that. Everyone told me, put your money in PARA, it's a good deal, blah, blah, blah. You would have probably told me the same thing, and also PARA is not linked to the stock market, so I'm very happy, because I did choose PARA, and my money is safe.
Yes, I have a modicum of money still in Para from when I worked there for 2 years as a public school teacher, and I'm just like, just keep it there, just like stay there. That's like the online equivalent of burying a hole out in a yard somewhere and just dumping your money in there.
All right. Well, yeah, maybe, Sean, all the freaks telling us to buy gold finally have a point. Because you know what? You can bury your gold in the backyard. Yes. You can't bury your retirement savings, because that's just ones and zeros on a computer somewhere. Anyway, today, this is kind of part of what we're talking about, because our main topic is money associated, because it's about a 100-year-old book called The Great Gatsby, which is about the Jazz Age, where famously, ostentatious wealth never led anyone astray. It all went great, the party never ended, and nothing bad ever happened. Certainly, a good book to be reading now to think about, what will not happen to us, Sean.
Yes, it's funny because we've already recorded that section of the podcast, and we didn't know just how relevant some of that stuff would be just several days afterwards, after recording that bit.
Yeah, so that's a topic Sean chose, as you might imagine, from his English teacher roots, but I think it's a fun topic. This, it's that book is turning 100 this month. We talk about the book, we talk about 2 of its major movie adaptations, and a fun time is had by all, except for me, because I had to watch those movies.
Yeah, well, one of the movies didn't have only bad stuff in it, and then one of the movies was one of the more boring movies one could ever see.
So that is the topic, but before then, we kind of have... Our news is sort of a secondary topic today, because we had the full unveiling of the Nintendo Switch 2, which, I was very excited to just get to talk about, hey, this thing looks cool, there's a lot of fun games, we get to talk about... does the hardware look good? Are we excited for GameCube games on Switch? Are we excited for this new FromSoft game? Blah, blah, blah. But we don't really get to talk about any of that. We get to talk about that in the hypothetical, kind of. But what we really have to talk about is the fact that on the same day, Trump opened his ass on the global economy. And I'm sorry, gamers, you can't separate your politics from your games anymore. You never could. That was bullshit. But especially now, because it's just, we can't leave politics out of this episode, because it's now come for us all.
Yes, it's just fascinating, because I feel like there's like 4 or 5 different points where if we had recorded the news segment on the Nintendo Switch 2 thing, we would just have completely different conversations. Like how rapidly shit changed over the course of basically a 24-hour period is pretty fucking crazy.
Yeah. It is pretty fucking crazy. So that is where we are going with things today. We'll also have a show and tell segment where we're going to get to talk about a couple of fun different things. But yeah, I think news is where we're going to go first. Before we get into any of that, one bit of housekeeping. Japanimation Station Season 5, our grand tour, is well underway. If you've been missing it, please go catch up. If you've been listening, thank you. We're happy to have you there. So far, we have had episodes on Dragon Ball GT, the 1969 version of Dororo by Tezuka Osamu, the 2019 version of Dororo by Studio Mappa, and this weekend we have an episode all about the anime Rama trilogy from Tezuka's studio Mushi Pro coming out. That is one of my favorites of the season, and really I'm just so happy this season is finally out in the world airing for people to hear because it's some damn good stuff.
Yes, and everything we've watched is fascinating, and then there was Dragon Ball GT.
Dragon Ball GT was fascinating.
Fascinating, it's a word you could use, There are parts of it. There's discussion to be had, for sure, on Dragon Ball GT, and we had a lot of it.
There were about 7 hours worth of discussion, if I did my math right. So anyway, that is all there. But like, I don't know, Sean, how are you doing these days?
I've got my head to the grindstone because we're coming up on the STAR test, which is the state mandated test that everyone has to take. The English one is next Wednesday. So we've been hard at work on that bullshit, I think is what is fair to call it. And then also this is like the point of the year where you start hearing rumblings about like, oh, this is being planned for the master schedule, or this is something that's going to come down the pipe for next year from some law or some bullshit that got passed. So like I've definitely had a lot of stuff going on in the workspace the past couple weeks.
I have too. In March, I did midterms for both of my classes. One of those, doing a midterm for a 100-person lecture class is a production. I knew some of that as having been a TA for a long time. I don't think I realized just how much of a production it is. Like, getting the test ready, you have to get it ready well ahead of time so that you have time to like not just make copies, but like get it ready for people who might need to go take the test with like student disability services and have, and then you have a million people being like, I scheduled a flight for the day that was on the syllabus the entire time and I didn't know. And I have to be like, okay, well, is this for like a family event or is it for like a medical thing? Because it's like, I'm not just, again, the syllabus was there. You have no excuse. And just like so many student things. And then obviously grading it and getting that all back. So I'm through all of that. But that was quite an experience. Also, my first time writing a test like that for a college course. And from top to bottom, writing like a full midterm, like 3-hour exam. And I was happy with how it turned out because our grading average was about a 79, which I think is pretty good for a first attempt at doing that. Because I take it on myself of like, did I write a too hard a test, too easy a test? I think that's maybe in the Goldilocks zone.
79%? Yeah. I mean, that sounds good to me.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I've been up to. I have to say though, Sean, and this is related to the topic today, I'm in a bad mood a lot of the time these days. I'm depressed. A lot of it is the news. It is the, right now, obviously, we're all focusing on the economics of this one singular dipshit choosing to blow up the global economy. But like, the fact that we're disappearing people like we're a fucking 80s South American dictatorship or Stalinist Russia, the just sheer evil on display, I don't know how to like block it out of my head. And man, it's bringing me down. I don't know. It's bringing me down.
Yeah, I mean, it's some truly evil shit is going down for sure. And the most like infuriating part of it in some ways is how limp the sort of like media structure and stuff like that is around that should be in place as safeguards for this kind of stuff. And they're just like letting it through and they don't really care. And they're just sort of like playing it like it's a fucking soccer game they're reporting on or something between Trump and the court system. And it's just like really puts it into stark relief how far down our whole like system has gone. That is like, if you compare this to the way that like the Watergate scandal was treated, like the Watergate shit is nothing. It's not even a fucking blip on the scale of the kind of stuff that Trump is doing actively, basically every single day in office. And yet there's no sort of like concerted, focused effort by a lot of that layer of our society to act against it. And that is the thing I think is, for me, the most depressing part of all of it. Because I expect Trump and his cronies to be evil, but you want there to be a certain limit at which there's a stronger response from certain sections of society, and maybe there is no limit there. Maybe that truly he could just shoot someone on live TV and people just be like, oh, well, that's interesting. Like, let's discuss the political ramifications of what could this mean for the undecided voter. So,
Sean, he did a coup. You don't have to do the hypothetical of did he shoot someone. He did a coup where multiple people were killed. Cops were beaten to death by his supporters on his orders on live TV. We don't have to do the hypotheticals. He got away with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, here's the moment that broke me, that like sent me into a tailspin, I have to say. And some of this is just my thinking about film and film history too, is I think in terms of images. And there was the video. Now we're sending all these people without any kind of due process. We have no idea and by the way, if they're criminals or not doesn't matter. You're not allowed to do this to people.
Yes.
So I don't care what they did. This is illegal. Sending them down to an El Salvador torture prison. So we're putting them in camps. We're doing the camps. We are doing the camps. That is happening. And Kristi Noem, one of his flunkies, went down to the camps and did a video with all these El Salvadoran prisoners posed with their heads shaved behind her. That's a Nazi tactic. Mm-hmm. That is not like in the broad sense of like people saying something they don't like is Nazi-esque. No, that's something the Nazi party did. You can see pictures of it. And I was thinking very much of the Alan Rene film Night and Fog, which is the definitive documentary on the Holocaust. It came out in the 50s, and it was the first time most of the world had seen actual images from inside the camps. And it is still very shocking. It's still, for a 30-minute movie, you realize just how much we still kind of treat that period of history with kid gloves when we talk about it, when you actually have to look at the images, which I think is important. And there are just multiple images from that film that are one-to-one comparisons with what the Trump administration is currently doing in their propaganda machine. And there was something about that, and that being a common film we teach, I was thinking about whether or not like I needed to emergency add that film to my syllabus, just out of a sense of like I should be proliferating these images. And I decided not to, because we already did 1 week where we focused on a Holocaust film. And the week where I would have had to put this, we just didn't have time to like give that movie the due it would have had. So, but I'm just thinking about these things, because a lot of what, I show, and I think what, I put together, sometimes I think about is the power of images, and like, are there things we can learn from? Like, one of the reasons I think The Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith should be taught is so that you can see what this kind of evil propaganda looks like, and you can recognize it today when it comes back, and it does over and over and over again. And I just, this is the kind of stuff that has just been sending me into a tailspin, where it's like, and I guess it's also the lack of empathy in some other corners. And I know the whole goal of the authoritarian state is to make you feel isolated. And that's part of the problem with the news you're talking about, Sean. Because we're recording this on Sunday, April 6th. Yesterday were some of the biggest protests in American history all across the nation. The news mostly did not cover it because they are arms of the Trump machine, and they don't want you to feel like you are part of a big, bold group of people in a community who want this to stop. We are, and we need to remember that. But it feels hard when there's people who are not. And I can't turn off the empathy. I don't understand how people can turn off the empathy. I don't understand how you can't have your day ruined by this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so oppressive. It is just this sort of like constant wave that hits you for sure. Yeah, I mean, it is as bad as we like thought it could get. Like it is in that like kind of worst case scenario is where we still are at. Which is frightening.
It is. And I guess I wanted to talk about that up front because it's going to intersect with things we talk about today. And I also I don't want to like put on the happy face and pretend we're just doing a silly, fun podcast in the midst of Rome burning. I don't know. I can't not say that, if that is
for
fair.
Sure.
Okay. Well then, you want to talk about the news?
Yes, let's talk about the news, the other dimension of the news.
Yeah. All right. So, Sean, we sort of have two buckets here. We have before the April 2nd Nintendo Direct, where we got the Nintendo Switch 2 stuff, which is the main bulk of our news today, because that was the big news in our corner of the world. But then we had a little bit of earlier stuff, including another Nintendo Direct they did on March 27th, which was focusing on stuff that applies to the Switch 1 as well. But there was one other piece of non-Nintendo news that I know you wanted to talk about. So I don't even fully understand this, Sean, other than that I saw it for 5 seconds and it made me want to throw up. But do you want to educate us about the Quake 2 incident?
Yes. So we talked about on the last podcast that Microsoft announced their sort of whole initiative with AI in games and all that bullshit. That's where Phil Spencer gave his absolute mind-bending quote about like, AI being used for game preservation that just is like, what in the flying fuck are you even talking about? And now they have made a version of what they're doing available to the public, which I appreciate, because it allows everybody to experience firsthand how fucking awful this shit is. And they have taken Quake 2, obviously a beloved classic PC first-person shooter, and they have put out, and again, this is freely accessible. Anybody with a computer can access this abomination. It is the Quake 2 Microsoft AI Copilot Edition, which I've also called the Video Game Nightmare Generator, because it is just fucking... It's mind-blowing that you would make this available for people to access, because it is impossible to make the mental leap from how you could go from this to a like product that people would want, because it is a very low resolution version of Quake 2 that has the worst input lag you have ever seen in a game. It's also
Sean, I'm trying it right now. Yeah. From hitting a key on my keyboard to when he moves, it's like at least 2 seconds.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's absolutely insane input lag. You also do not have mouse look, because input lag and mouse controls do not go together. So you have to use the keyboard to both look and move. And you can shoot and you can jump. But the thing that in particular makes it a video game nightmare generator is it has the same problems that every version of this let's make an AI make a video game tech demo thing has. And these kinds of tech demos have existed for a couple of years at this point. And that's that they have no memory, right? They're being trained off of like video of Quake 2. So the game, or the AI sort of simulacrum here, has no understanding of the inner logic or the inner workings of the game. It is only looking at the output. It doesn't really know what the input is. So it has no sort of visibility to what Quake 2 actually is under the graphical veneer. And so it has also no memory then. So it can't remember where things are. If you spin in a circle for long enough, eventually things will disappear. If you look up or down, the environment will change. If you walk into a dark area, you will become trapped in an endless void, because it just has lost memory of everything else that was around you, and everything just becomes a black corner. And it is just insane to me that you would give people access to this, because the problems with it are so extensive, so fundamental, seemingly so impossible to overcome, because the entire concept of trying to get an AI to generate a video game based on learning what that video game looks like is so fucking stupid that I just don't know why you would put this out. I don't even really know why you would pursue this as a like research project, but at least as a research project, it's a like, maybe something will come of this. Let's just like take a crack at it. Like I can kind of understand from that perspective why you'd investigate if there's something here, but I just think there's so clearly not anything here. But again, I'm grateful that they made it available to the public, because it just makes, I've seen some people who online kind of turn on this that previously on the last AI announcement were like, oh, well, maybe there's like some potential here. And this just makes it feel like, oh no, there's no potential. Like this is stupid, because it's Quake 2. My fucking microwave could run Quake 2, man. Like, this should not be a complicated thing. We don't need to come up with another way to play Quake 2. And obviously I know the end goal of this project is not to make a perfect version of Quake 2. But it just makes it so clear that there's just no clear benefit to this approach. And I hope that at some point this fucking, camel's back breaks from enough of these straws, because man, the AI shit is just getting exhausting. And it, especially with like, what we're talking about with like Trump, there have been some very good think pieces, like looking at the confluence of AI, the AI aesthetic and fascism, which has been very fascinating to look at, because I think it's a very well observed point in that like AI art and fascism go hand in hand. And that's like historically, this has been a thing that's happened with how like the like fascist intelligentsia, if you want to call them that, like view art and architecture and things like that as an arm of the state and as a way to crush like liberal spirit and creativity. And AI just feels like it's the modern version of that.
Well, it's because it's specifically about taking out the individuality of it, right?
Yes.
They don't want individuals. They don't want individual expression. So, like, the Nazis had their whole, like, museum of degenerate art and stuff like that. They went after a lot of artists early on. And fascist architecture, like, would be, I think, the big kind of, like, analog point to AI art now. And it is this same kind of, it's like, it's austere and ugly and, like, prima facie bad, but you have to pretend it is good to show fealty to the state. And that's what AI stuff is. Like, it's very clearly, there's no way a reasonable person could look at any of this generative AI stuff and say it has any real use cases or anything valuable or anything good. But you have to pretend that it does as a sort of show of fealty to the cultural structure that has risen around it, which is now inseparable from Trumpist fascism.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's all part of the same beast. Like just this Quake 2 thing. It is, if you play video games, you should spend like 5 seconds checking this thing out, because it is such a, like, oh yeah, this is the bad shit. Like this is the fucking abyss of video games right here. It is like a Lovecraftian horror of a video game. So people should check it out just to have that experience.
Indeed. All right, you want to talk about some Nintendo stuff?
Yes. So we want to talk about the first Nintendo Direct?
Yeah, let's talk about this, and then the Switch 2 needs its own kind of discussion, because there's other stuff going on there. But this will all apply to your Switch 1 as well. So, like, they showed off more of Metroid Prime 4 and Pokemon Legends Z2A, which we had been assuming the whole time will also be Switch 2 games. At the Switch 2 Direct, we learned that will be the case. They will be cross-gen. There will be, same as, like, if you buy a PlayStation 4 game, there's a PS4 and a PS5 game, and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, but they showed off more of those games. They both look, I mean, Metroid Prime 4 looks fantastic if you're into Metroid. I think Pokemon Legends Z2A looks very promising if you're into Pokemon. I mean, notably, they have spent longer on this one than other recent Pokemon games. Like, we had last year, 24, we didn't have a major Pokemon game, which was the first year in the Switch's lifespan that was not the case. So maybe the Pokemon Violet and Scarlet coming out of the oven not finished was a sign of things for them.
Yes.
And spending a little extra time. So, yeah.
I will say, as someone who only, like, looks at this stuff from the outside, it definitely, Z2A looks acceptable to me in a way that Legends Arceus and Scarlet Violet did not. Just as, like, an outside observer, where I looked at those games, I was like, what the fuck is going on? Just, like, aesthetically and visually, in terms of the technology they're using here, those games just looked fucking great. Particularly Scarlet and Violet was insane. And this looks like, okay, yeah, like, it's not cutting edge. I mean, you put that next to Metroid Prime 4, obviously very different kinds of games, but you put it next to, like, any other decent-looking Switch game, and Pokemon Legends Z2A still looks very old and outdated, but it doesn't look ugly in the way that those other games looked ugly to me. Like, this game looks fine visually.
Yeah, so we'll see more about that in the future. There's a sequel to Tomodachi Life coming out. I never got into Tomodachi Life on the 3DS. I know some people loved it. It has been, I think we all assumed that was kind of a one and done from Nintendo, but it is getting a sequel, and some people online seemed to be excited about that. There's a new Rhythm Heaven game. You put this on the outline, Sean.
Well, Rhythm Heaven,
so tell us about it.
Rhythm Heaven kicks ass. Rhythm Heaven's a cool series of games. They haven't done one in a long time. I know the creator of Rhythm Heaven has had a lot of health issues, because I think he had cancer, and so he's been kind of like in and out of things for a long time, but he is coming back. So we do have a proper new Rhythm Heaven game called Rhythm Heaven Miracle Stars, and it looks like Rhythm Heaven. It's got the same cartoonish art style. It's clearly the same sort of like WarioWare meets a rhythm game kind of design, and it was just interesting to have a new one of this, because again, it's been a very, very long time since, I think the 3DS was the last time they had a Rhythm Heaven game. So I was.
And Sean, I think you put the Japanese title on here. In English, it's called Rhythm Heaven Groove.
Okay, probably yeah. So I was watching these trailers with Nakamura Yuichi doing the voiceover, because that's who does it on the Japanese titles. So yes, it is Rhythm Tengoku Miracle Stars. I didn't bother to look up. I just assumed they translated the heaven part, and that was it.
And the last release was in 2015. It was Rhythm Heaven Mega Mix, so it has been 10 years.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I've never played one of these, but I'm glad that there's another one coming out. That's awesome.
You should play Rhythm Heaven. They're good games.
I should. Tell us about the next couple things too, Sean, because these are ones you put on here because they interested you.
So the next up thing I've got here is Raido Remaster, The Mystery of the Soulless Army. This is A game I've wanted to play for a long time. It's originally a PS2 game from Atlas. It's a Shin Megami Tensei spinoff where you play as Raido, who is a like detective in the Taisho era of Japan who has to solve these mysteries involving the Shin Megami Tensei devils. So like Jack Frost and all those guys are in the game. But it's like, I think it's like more of almost a character action-ish kind of game almost. It's like real-time combat and you summon the devils. And I know that that people who are like way into Shin Megami Tensei stuff that's outside the realm of just Persona really, really liked these games. There's 2 of them because they're Devil Summoner spin-offs. And
yeah,
they're
this
doing
is
remaster.
Yeah, this is the first one of those. Its full title in English was Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner, Raido it's small there, Kuzunoha versus the Soulless Army. So it's a very long title. And yeah, this is the first Devil Summoner entry. That's interesting, yeah.
Yes, and I do know that they have Sugita Tomokazu is voicing Raido, which I know was not in the original. But he played that character in later things like voice CDs, so they brought him back to then do the voice now for this remastered version of the game, which that's also cool. And that's on everything. That's not just on Switch. So if you want to get your Raido on like I do, there's now a way to do that. That's not like seeking down an obscure PS2 disc or just emulating it online.
And there is a sequel, Devil Summoner 2, Raido Kuzunoha versus King Abaddon. And also, this is so confusing because there is the original Devil Summoner is a game on PlayStation just called Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner, but then there's this Devil Summoner, but then Devil Summoner 2 is a sequel to the Raido one. This series makes no sense, but that's okay. I know that. It's
because you've got Megami Tensei, and then you had Shin Megami Tensei. And then from there, you have a bunch of spin-offs, including Devil Summoner. And the Devil Summoner has its own spin-off, which is Raido Kuzunoha.
Because it's got the Soul Hackers line, which is Devil Summoner Soul Hackers, which means you get stuff like Devil Summoner, Soul Hackers, Intruder. So you're down 3 layers in the title to get there.
Yeah, it's the world of Shin Megami Tensei. It's a complex tree, and those trees have many branches. Let's talk about, Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, the Ultra Suplex Hold. It's all the same shit. Next up, we've got a new entry in a series of games that I've always wanted to play. And this one is coming worldwide, which is awesome, day and date. It's Super Robot Wars Y, which is obviously the Super Robot Wars series, which has a billion trillion games going back to the Super Famicom. This is the most recent entry. They did show off Soletta from Witch from Mercury, alongside a bunch of other things. But that was like one of like the new things they have in here is Witch from Mercury stuff. But this is, if you don't know what Super Robot Wars is, it is a big turn-based tactics style game that is a giant mashup of various real robot and giant robot or like super robot series in Japan. Go all things including from like Gundam to basically Voltron and all that kind of stuff. So it is all areas of giant robots are represented here with very gorgeous, full, crazy super move animations, which if you watch the trailer, they show you some of that. They show you one with Domon from G Gundam, which is it's the coolest fucking super move you've ever seen in a tactics game. Down to they do the thing where he unsheathes the sword, like the beam saber, directly into camera, and the words G Gundam are in the beam of the saber, like in the opening of G Gundam.
This is great.
I was like, shit, I need to play these games. But most of these games have only come out in Japanese.
Here's the thing, Sean.
Yeah.
We had one that came out in English, and it was Super Robot Wars 30 in 2021, but it only came out on Steam for Windows, which was super bizarre. So, like, because this feels like a game you would want on Switch first and then maybe other consoles and, like, Windows last. But for whatever reason, that's what it did. But now this one is coming to all the systems, right?
Yes. And if, I've played many games in Japanese at this point, but if there's one genre of game I'm just way too intimidated to try to play only Japanese, it's a, like, complex turn-based tactics game. Just, like, I break into a sweat just thinking about trying to read the, like, kanji compound words in a game like that. It's like, no, thank you. I'll take that one to English, please. So I'm very happy that's coming out. Again, that's not just a Switch exclusive. That's coming basically everything. And
it's PS5 and Steam also.
Yes. Yeah, I guess when I say everything, assume that I probably don't mean Xbox. Maybe the next Xbox if it just plays computer games, who knows. Then the next up, this is, I just thought was an interesting announcement because it kind of shows a trend that's happening now. So Bandai Namco is developing and publishing a remake or remaster of the first two Padpon games called Padpon 1+2 Replay, and they are also making a new Everybody's Golf game, which is that used to be called Hot Shots Golf in English. Everybody's Golf is a direct translation of the Japanese title. And obviously Hot Shots Golf goes back to like the PS1 days. It's like an old school golf game. And this is particularly notable because both Padpon and Everybody's Golf are Sony IPs. So Sony has licensed seemingly these IPs out to Bandai Namco to make these games. That's particularly notable because fairly recently, Bandai Namco also released a remaster of the PlayStation Vita game Freedom Wars, which I know is a kind of like a cult hit that the Vita had. And so seemingly this is an approach that Sony is taking, which is interesting to me, of looking at some of these old IPs that Sony doesn't have like either like like their own in-house developers that they want to use on it, or doesn't always have like a good place to release it. Like some of these are like Patapon and Freedom Wars are both originally from handheld devices. So it's like, yeah, you can put these out on Sony devices, on PlayStation. These games are also obviously coming to PS5. They're not like Switch exclusives or anything, but they're the kind of games that make more sense, generally speaking, on a handheld. So it makes sense that you'd want them on Switch. And I like this approach. I wish that other game companies would do this more, to say like, hey, with what we're doing right now, these companies, many of them have been around for decades and decades at this point. They've got lots of interesting properties or old games that you could do remasters of or do new entries for, but that like entity is not in a position or does not want to spend the resources to do that. License that shit out. And there's just so many companies like EA, Ubisoft, and all these big old school publishers that are sitting on this like treasure trove of old games and old ideas that they just kind of hoard like fucking dragons and don't give out to anybody. And it's cool that Sony is doing this, and I hope that they continue to do this with some of their old stuff. Like it would be cool if Ape Escape or some of those games could find a new life on like the broader market, than not just be trapped on like a Sony console. I hope that they continue to do this because this is cool.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, Sony has a whole catalog of handheld games from PSP and Vita that sometimes they've gotten out on PlayStation, but like, you're right, I think they make more sense elsewhere. And for whoever's doing this, it's free money. It's not, it's not like you're having to like do a massive investment that will, inevitably lose you money. You're having someone else develop it, and then you're publishing it and you're getting the money. And if it's a game that's 20 years old, you're not losing brand value on it, know? Like, yeah, I can understand if they don't want to do like the Vita Uncharted game on Switch, but that's also because that game sucked. No one wants to play it. So, yeah. Anyway. All right. Another announcement from the March Nintendo Direct was Nintendo unveiling their virtual game card system, which I think is an interesting idea about how to share digital games. Because this just creates a way that you can use your digital games the same way you would as physical game cards on Nintendo Switch. So if you have multiple Switches, you could take the game, treat it as a card, move it from one Switch to the other. It lives there now. Or if you have a friend they specified, you could lend them the game, and it would basically disappear from your Switch, or you wouldn't be able to access it. It would be on theirs for a set amount of time. I think they said 14 days before it would give up, but they would just have the game. And this is obviously, they have an eye on that a lot of people are now going to be in, if they aren't already, multi-Switch households with the Switch 2 coming out. And this is just I think, more easy to understand, consumer-friendly way of doing digital game sharing, because that, even when it works well, can be a confusing system of a lot of different accounts and whatnot. And I like this idea. I will say, as someone who, my brother and I share games a lot on Switch, where one of us will buy one game and one of us will buy the other, and then maybe when one of us is done with it, we'll lend it out. And it's something I do consider sometimes when I'm buying games, is I might get the physical because I know I'm going to lend it to someone. This would allow you to do that. If I had a video game that I bought digitally, I could just say to my brother, here, you can have it for, and it would be 2 weeks. I assume you could renew that later on if you wanted to. And that does make that easier. I think that's nice for digital stuff. I've seen some people complaining that this only works locally. It does not work over the internet. So if you're in a different state, you can't necessarily do this with someone. Although, to be clear, that would also apply to physical game cards, short of like putting them in the mail and sending them to someone. So the idea is that it works the same as physical stuff. So that is, I think, the rationale behind that.
Yeah, and I think for me, critically about this is that it seems to me, based on what I read, that they are basically also giving you the option to either you can use this system or you can keep using the older system, which is like the traditional thing that Xbox and Sony also do, where you can have your like primary console and any user on the primary console can play every game on that console. Right. And then if you're accessing your account in those games on a console that's not set as your primary console, you have to be connected to the internet and signed into that account to play them. And that obviously, there's like a lot of advantages to that system if you are like, for like me with like PlayStation, that's what I do with my dad because we're both playing PlayStation 5s and I just have his PlayStation 5 as my primary console. So every game I buy, he can just play. But if you're trying to share with more than just a single household of people, then that system doesn't make sense because you're having to give account information to like lots of other people and stuff like that. So I like that. As far as I understand, again, this stuff is not like in the wild yet, so we'll see if there are like any like weird exceptions to this, but it seems like you can kind of pick or choose which version of this works best for your situation.
I also think it's just the kind of thing where anytime you can take a digital good and treat it like a physical good, people understand that. Like, parents will understand this better than, I think, like, the existing system in some cases. In some cases, as you say, if you have two consoles that are parked in one place in one house, the existing system works very well for that. But if you have things that are kind of on the go or you're trading with friends, this kind of thing I think does make more sense. And I think, as you said, Sean, the fact that they're giving you the option to use either system is good. And I would like to see other game manufacturers experiment with stuff like this. Because again, I think when you can treat a digital good like a physical good and give some of those bonuses, that helps. That's nice.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very curious to see, like, once the system is in the wild, like, what it's like for people, because it's a very interesting idea.
Definitely. But like, I just remember the other day I was talking about we were talking about different Switch 2 games, and Thomas was like, I was saying, are you going to play Metroid Prime 4? And he said, I'm not sure if I'll want to spend the money on it. I'm like, I could lend it to you. And he's like, what if you buy it digitally? And I'm like, I can still lend it to you now. That's how this works. They're like, oh, that's cool. Okay. So, that's nice. I'm also curious how this will work on Switch 2 versus Switch 1. Like, what if I have the Switch 2 version of Metroid Prime 4, but my friend has a Switch 1? I assume you could just do that, because it's just a license, and it could just tell you to download the Switch 1 version. And it's like, that's a cheaper version, technically. So I'm curious how that will work.
Yes, yeah, I am curious about that, like the different SKUs and stuff like that. That's an interesting question.
All right. Then on April 2nd, bright and early, this was 7 a.m. our time. I got up at 6:45 to watch this and take notes. Fucking crazy.
That is, anyway, that's crazy. God, that's so early.
I know.
Man, that's crazy. Yeah. God. Who would get up that early every weekday?
Well, Sean, no one forced you to be a teacher, all right? Jesus. It's like someone in the army complaining about having to wear camo. Come on. I'm kidding. I respect Army people and public school teachers, and I think you're doing important work.
Yes, I was halfway through period 1 when this Nintendo Direct happened, and I was like, that's
oh my God, I'm sorry, Sean. All right. Anyway, here's the thing. We could go through all the different bullet points of the Direct, and a lot of it is interesting and fun to talk about. I feel like we should just start with the pricing kerfuffle and all of that, and just get that out of the way, because that's the only thing anyone's talking about right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's two dimensions to this conversation. There is what happened in the Nintendo Direct and what did they announce in terms of software and hardware there. And then there is what is everything that happened in the fallout of that. And even that is like kind of a two-stage conversation, because one stage is the kind of chaos of immediately following the Direct, and like people are finding the prices in random places. And it was very like, as someone who was following this news like by just randomly checking my phone during passing period throughout the workday, it just seemed insane. Like everyone was sort of like finding little nuggets, and some of them were like true, some of them were half true. But then you have, after a full day, you then have them announcing on that Friday that they're going to put the pre-orders on hold. And that's like a kind of third dimension to the conversation. So
yes.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do the basics then, Sean. So the Switch 2 is launching in North America. We'll be using those prices mainly. So if you're somewhere else, I'm sorry. Or I didn't look up every it's very confusing this time. So everyone's got different prices. But in North America, it is launched. I shouldn't say North America. Canada has different prices. In the United States of America, it is launching at $449 US. there is a bundle with Mario Kart World for $499. Mario Kart World on its own is $80. Other Switch 2 games appear to be $70, and Switch 1 games appear to be mainly sticking at that $60 price point. Remember, the only Switch 1 game that ever came out at $70 was Tears of the Kingdom. So that is the base pricing. Obviously, there's some sticker shock on that. It's, I think a lot of, if you looked at like industry analysts, they were all saying it's going to be somewhere between that $399 and $499 price point. It could be $499, it could be $399. Nintendo settled basically in the middle, although there is the $499 option if you want Mario Kart bundled in. I'm kind of curious who is buying a Switch 2 at launch who doesn't want Mario Kart, but there you go. If I am able to get my hands on this, would be getting the $499 version, save $30 on Mario Kart. But in any case, those are the prices. If you, and again, we can't get into Nintendo's thinking. We don't know all the ideas of what's going on. I do think it's hard to ignore that everybody on Earth knew these tariffs were coming. The general expectation was that Trump was going to announce something in the range of 10% universal tariffs. If you assume Nintendo wanted to sell this thing at $399, $450 being bumping it by a little over 10% with some wiggle room in case things went rocky in one way or another, kind of makes sense. The thing is, that's not what Trump announced. Trump then announced crazy, we can't even get into all of it, but basically it's every nation on Earth has some kind of, other than Russia, the ones that, he loves, have some kind of tariff announced on them. They used a very weird formula that economists like Paul Krugman believe might have been derived from ChatGPT, that basically takes a country's trade deficit with us, divided by their imports, and then creates a crazy tariff solution over it. I don't know have you heard the Paul Krugman theory, Sean? Because he ran this. He asked it's basically if you ask ChatGPT how to create a universal tariff solution, this is what it spits out, because ChatGPT has read all the economic stuff but doesn't understand it. So no actual economist would tell you to do any of this, but they definitely wouldn't tell you to do this.
Well, this is... The idea that they're basing it on the trade deficit is just the most petty bitch. It makes America look so pathetic. Because when one of the reasons why America has a trade deficit with so many countries is because America is in a position of power and influence. And because also we import so much stuff from so many other places. So punishing some of our most lucrative trade partners because we technically have a trade deficit in one dimension of our trade with them it's just the most you fucking idiot. The reason why it's like that is because, quote unquote, America is great. It's because America is the most economically dominant country on the planet is the reason why it's like that in the first place. And if you're actively trying to get rid of that, you're actively trying to reduce America's economic dominance on on a global scale, which, I don't have a problem with trying to make America less powerful. That's fine with me, honestly. But it seems like an insane thing for the President of the United States to be actively trying to do. The fucking idiot.
I'll say it. I have a problem with it. Do I wish we did less bad military shit? Yes. That's not what he's cutting. The things that he's cutting are the things that are good about America's power overseas, like USAID and all the stuff like giving drugs to children in Africa, like the soft power things that are genuinely good things we do with our power, or the fact that the reason we are the world's reserve currency is this. It's because people spend more on the dollar than they buy. And that's good. It means our dollar is powerful and stable. And we have enjoyed that for a long time. And it is good for us living in the United States. And if you are the president of the United States, you should be doing more of what is good for your people. This is wrong. We can get into the economics of it later. To finish the explanation, specifically, why would, because I saw a lot of consternation of it looked like Nintendo already priced in the tariffs on the April 2nd announcement. Why would they then delay the pre-orders? As I just explained, it looks like they did price in the tariffs that were expected, but here's the thing. Nintendo had moved much of their production of these systems to Cambodia and Vietnam after Trump's first-term tariffs on China and pandemic production shocks led to them trying to work less with Chinese manufacturers. It just so happens that Cambodia and Vietnam had the highest and most unexpected tariffs in Trump's announcements of 49% and 47% respectively. So if you're wondering, why would Nintendo maybe have put a pause on the pre-orders for the Nintendo Switch 2 in America? That's why. And it's not just that. It's not just how do we price in this and what do we do about it? It's, well, Trump could do anything. He could pull this off tomorrow, and then he could put it back on worse than ever the day after that. This is so unpredictable. And when you're setting the price for a good like a video game console, which is supposed to be a price that will survive, maybe with a little bit of raising, little bit of lowering, but will basically be the baseline for the next 7 or 8 years, this is not an economic environment in which you can do that.
Yeah. It's insane. So again, there's 2 dimensions to this, because there is the original prices as announced, which, again, we can't know, like, how did the original sort of expected tariffs factor into those prices? Who knows? But certainly whatever plan they had for those prices, if that was designed with a buffer, or if they were being optimistic and thinking maybe the tariffs wouldn't be so bad, who knows? The reality was the tariffs are about 1 million times worse than anyone would have ever fucking expected, because because they're so huge and they're on everywhere, including, kind of infamously now, places where people don't live. Because again, they're fucking idiots. They're the biggest idiots on the planet, basically, and they've been given the most power of anyone on the planet. And it's, that's just not a great combination of things to have. So yeah, as you say, Nintendo is in an impossible position, because this is a flagship device. They only release these kinds of things every 8 to 10 years. It is a kind of thing that their whole company is kind of staked on. And the economics of that product are in the hands of an absolute madman who could do anything at any moment, and you can't know. Because look at what has happened with the tariffs so far between Canada and Mexico, and the insane ping-ponging back and forth of like, oh, we're going to do it on this date. Oh, but now we're not, because they said they're going to do the thing that they already were doing. And so now we're not going to do the tariffs for 90 more days, but now we are, but they're going to be worse, but now they're going to be better, but now they're not going to happen, but they are. It's like, how do you, as a company, plan to set prices and an economic strategy around your most important product of the fucking decade in that situation? Nobody knows the answer to that question. Obviously, Nintendo doesn't know the answer to that question. And so they said, they basically said that they'd call us back. They're like, hey, okay, hold on. We'll call you back later. The Switch 2, it'll come out. It'll come out on the same day, probably, hopefully, yeah. But let's call you back on the price. Give us a second to think about this shit.
Yes. And look, I've seen some people trying to do the dance of like, no, the tariffs didn't have anything to do with the $450 price. That's just Nintendo being greedy. You're not a serious person if you're saying that. You're just not. Because it's not just the literal tariffs. It's not just the like, we expect Trump to set this number. It's that we are in a period of massive economic uncertainty. And when you have a period of that kind of uncertainty, you hedge higher, not lower, because you need to build in the buffer, right? And like, that sucks, but that's a systemic issue right now. Nintendo's not the only one doing that kind of thing. And if you are one of the absolute fucking children spending time in your life on this earth going onto Nintendo YouTube streams and spamming it with the phrase drop the price, please go crack a newspaper or anything. Do anything. Educate yourself in some way. Really, ideally, use that time to go contact your senator or congressperson who might actually be able to do something about this. They're probably a craven piece of shit who won't, but they could, if enough of you call, if you put that energy into that. Because I need people to understand that we are not having a conversation about one company and its singular positioning and its singular greed. This is a systemic issue that is coming for everything and all of us, and it's been highlighted on Nintendo because they had the bad luck to put this out on the same day Trump decided to have his Liberation Day, right? So, like, this is just such a broader conversation. People need to understand, if these tariffs go through as written out by the Trump administration right now, it will destroy the video game market in the United States. There won't be one. It won't happen. You will not be able to get parts for your PC. You will not be able to build new gaming devices. Sony, the $699 for the PS5 Pro will be the tip of the fucking iceberg. You will be priced out of all of it. At the same time, you are being priced out of your groceries and the basic cost of living. That is what is going to happen. This is such a broader problem, to the point that talking about it through the lens of a video game device almost feels stupid.
Yeah, although it is because of one, because it's the Switch, right? Which is not just like, almost, or is, I don't know where we're at this point, the best selling console ever, but
Yes.
it's also this like mass marketed device that like kids own, right? And so it's like people are familiar with Nintendo in the video game space more than they are with any brand. And it is the timing of it couldn't be more ridiculous because Nintendo had this event planned
Yes.
before Trump had his tariff thing planned. I saw people being like, well, why didn't they move it? It's like, because they fucking set that date forever ago. They're working with how many different third parties getting different pieces together to create their presentation. Like, they can't just fucking move it, because also who knows what Trump's announcement was even going to like actually fully entail. So it's like
Trump's also said he was going to do that announcement several times and then not done it.
Yes.
So like, until he got on the podium and started talking, there was no guarantee any of this would happen.
Yeah, but so the end result is that the timing of it ended up being like Nintendo announces their stuff. There is a sticker shock on it, both with like the price of the console, but then I think for the bigger thing, honestly, I think that caused people, the reaction is probably Mario Kart World being $80. And then shortly after that, you get the tariff thing. And then shortly after that, you get Nintendo doing their "we'll call you back, we'll let you know" whole thing. And so, like, this story got picked up by major news organizations, I think, because it is such a juicy story. It's so illustrative of the consequences of these tariffs in like real fucking time. Of, we're going to have this product. This is when the pre-orders are going to come up. Here are our tariffs. Okay. We'll think about it. Like that dynamic is so stark that I do think that there is a illustrative power of this example, even if it is for a luxury good, and so it is not as vital as you say, like the prices of groceries that already have been just continuing to go up and up. Like that's going to cost people's lives, but this is something that is so clear for people to latch onto as a narrative.
Yeah. So let me give you my 2 cents as the avid Nintendo gamer on this podcast on my reaction to the pricing in real time. I think I was expecting $399 or $449. I think $399 would have felt fine to most people because the Switch 8 years ago launched at $299. That is true. But in the middle, they did have the Switch OLED, which went up to $350. The Switch 2 as a piece of kit is much more comparable to the Switch OLED than it is the Switch 1 in terms of screen size, build quality, all of those sorts of things. So that's $50 over the Switch OLED. It is a much more powerful system. Like, I think, and that is one of the things that we saw from this direct, is it's more powerful than we thought it was going to be even. Like, the fact that this built-in screen is a 120 hertz VRR panel, that was not something that was like rumored ahead of time. The fact that the built-in screen can do HDR, and the fact that it was showing off like the Switch 2 versions of like Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, those are full 4K 60 FPS versions that they even were showing off on the Treehouse stuff is like rock solid even in places that were not on Switch 1, like the Korok Forest and stuff. So better than like what the emulators are able to do on Windows. So like, it definitely is on the more powerful end of what we expected out of this thing. That's cool. So like $399 versus $299 8 years ago, I think that feels, again, like, the PS5 was also 100 more than the PS4 was when it came out, right?
Yeah.
So like, that's not insane. $449 is pushing it. I think with all of that in mind and with all of the economic uncertainty, like, yes, that is a bigger chunk of change than I would personally like to spend, but I didn't find it to be like an end of the world kind of price. I don't think it's the same way that like I saw the PS5 Pro without the, that is $700, but if you want a disk drive, it's $800. Like, that is like, there's no way I'm going to get that because also that's even more of a luxury good because technically my PS5 can play everything the PS5 Pro can do. So that was like my reaction, is that like, obviously not ideal, but also not end of the world. This is completely insane. We can talk about the Mario Kart World price differently. There's a lot of wonkiness with the game prices on this that are weird, and I'm kind of curious about the logic behind. But now we just don't know. We just don't know what it's going to be. We don't know if they're going to still, like, honestly, one of their options is just to not sell it in the US right now. Like, that's an option. It's not an easy one.
They've already got a bunch of units in warehouses,
Yes.
I don't think it's realistic for them to just not sell them.
The rumor is that they've got about 400,000 in the US, but like that's not anywhere close to enough for a launch. So a lot of them would still have to be imported and would be subject to these tariffs. So yeah, we shall see. I don't know. Does that sound reasonable? My outline of the pricing journey?
I mean, I struggle to imagine this device being cheaper than $450 to $500. Like, I don't think $400 is realistic for what they're doing, especially when you take into account the screen, which is a lot better than we thought. I know that's almost every element of this device has been completely leaked to high heaven. The two main things that we didn't really know is we didn't really know what the C button did, which now we know is like a chat button or whatever the C stands for there. And we didn't really know the details of the screen. I think we basically knew it was an LCD and not an OLED, but nobody knew what kind of LCD it was. And so the LCD being capable of HDR, 120 FPS, and VRR, like that, I'm honestly surprised that it's that, because I just don't see how Nintendo could have put this at what I think is the price that most people associate with Nintendo. So like my read on like how I suspect the tariff idea factored into this is I imagine that Nintendo had a range of prices they were thinking to set it at, with $400 being incredibly aggressive. And I think I'm sure it would have been an option. And I suspect that the tariffs just sort of moves that out of the realm of even possibility. But I honestly suspect that even in a world we all desperately wish we could live in, where Harris was president, I don't necessarily think this thing would be $400 even there. I just think Nintendo has pretty aggressive with what they're doing with the console in terms of the technology behind it in a way that's kind of honestly surprising to me. And I just do not see this thing being cheaper than it is.
Because they were emphasizing in the Direct the power of this thing.
Yes.
Like, when you look at the range of third-party games they wanted to show you running on this, it wasn't just like old PS4 games. It was some newer, more cutting-edge stuff that they wanted to show you will have this too, and positioning it as more of a competitor to the PS5. Not a complete one-to-one, but more of it than I think you would have expected from Nintendo.
Oh, I feel like the kind of the broad pitch for this is like, it reminds me more of like the Wii U relative to the 360 PS3. Like, they're pushing third party in a way that they have not since the Wii U. Remember, the Wii U was the last time Nintendo had a Call of Duty. It was the last time Nintendo regularly had all the sports titles. They went really hard on third parties in the Wii U because the Wii U could run all the third parties at that point. Obviously, it got aged out very quickly with the PS4 and the Xbox One, but at its launch, like, they were really big on it was symmetrical with all the other consoles available in a way that the Wii was not. And they're kind of in that space again with the Switch 2. And yeah, they absolutely are marketing it, at least in part, on power. They showed Cyberpunk, which infamously is a game that, ran like garbage on the PS4, Xbox One. I know updates made that better eventually. But I'm very curious what the benchmarks for that are going to look like, ultimately. But also they showed Metroid Prime 4, and they advertised Metroid Prime 4's Switch 2 version as being, it's got a 4K 60 mode and a 1080p 120 mode. Like, that's the same way that Microsoft and Sony show off their kinds of games. So I think, like, Nintendo absolutely has moved into the same kind of space that the rest of the industry is in. And it makes sense because they're making an iterative device. When you're making an iterative device, what do you have to sell it on? It's more powerful than the one you had before. They can't sell the Switch 2 on the fact that it's a handheld device because everyone knows it's a handheld device. It's obviously a handheld device. So it's like, what else can you give me? Well, look, it can run Metroid Prime 4 at twice the frame rate, probably at an even higher resolution than it will be running on the regular Switch at that frame rate. So, so when you take all that into account, you think about how prices for everything in technology have been going up. Again, even just ignoring the tariff thing, like, this shit is getting so expensive. It was getting expensive before Trump became president again for a whole variety of reasons having to do with cryptocurrency and AI and Moore's Law being dead and a whole confluence of bullshit that is going on. Nintendo is not
chip
immune
production
to that.
Being a weird thing in the world right now with
Nintendo is not immune to all those things, and so it's like, I think 450 is exactly kind of what I was expecting it to be at. So I was not surprised. Now, I'm also not in the market. Like, nothing they showed here made me want to get a Switch 2. So it's like I'm not particularly tempted by it. And I can understand people whose expectations for a Nintendo console is that it is only within a certain price range, being kind of shocked by this. But I think that those people were not paying attention to the larger trends, or were living in a fantasy world where Nintendo was somehow immune to those trends. Nintendo's not immune to the trends of the video game industry. They're just like half a step behind where the other guys are because they're making portable devices, so they're lower powered devices. But they're not like immune to the rising costs and the rising development times and all that stuff still happening. It's just happening at a different point for them than it has been happening for Microsoft and Sony.
Yeah. So, like, I think you and I are on the same page. 450 is, within the context of the world we live in, I think fairly reasonable. There's a sticker shock to it, but there's a sticker shock to a lot of things today.
Yeah.
And, like, I'll just say for me, as someone who is kind of in Nintendo's wheel, obviously I'm not kind of,
Yes.
I am very much in their wheelhouse. I love their stuff. The Switch is my favorite system I've ever owned. Like, I'll put it this way. Does this feel like it offers me $100 in additional value over the $350 I paid for my Switch OLED? Yes, and I actually am surprised to say that, because I think the Switch OLED is such a good piece of kit. Like, it feels so good in the hand, that screen looks so nice, all of that stuff, that I don't know if I would have said that before them showing off some of the, like, unexpected things here, and, like, how much it's going to be able to play, how much more this could be your main console if you wanted it to be, in a way that, like, the Switch 1, if you did want to play some of those bigger third-party games, couldn't. You did have to have something else on the side. So, again, I think the $450, I would be happily willing to pay that, or the $499. And, you know, one other thing I wanted to say here that I was just thinking, because looking at different comments online, I want to remind people, if you were excited for this, and you like Nintendo, and you wanted to use your own hard-earned money to pay $450 for a Nintendo Switch 2, that's fine. You don't have to feel guilty about that. You don't have to feel guilty about wanting to, like, buy a new video game system with the money you made yourself. That's fine. Like, now, if you're taking it away from, like, your children's, like, grocery fund for the month, maybe then feel bad. But if you have the money in a reasonable sense, that's fine. And, like, because I've seen a lot of, with the tariff stuff, especially now that, like, we don't know the price, of people talking, like, feeling like they have to, like, guilt themselves into, like, blah, blah. It's like, no. That Trump is taking your joy out of your fucking mouth, and that's okay to be mad about that. I guess I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I bought a PS5 Pro, and I'm very happily playing Monster Hunter Wilds.
There you
I don't
go.
give a shit what other people think. Yeah, I bought the super expensive one, and I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, and do you know what I mean, Sean?
Yes.
I've seen this introduced into the conversation, especially because now that the Trump administration line is, recessions are good actually, and cheap goods are not what American people want. No, fuck you. You are allowed to want the things you want with the money you make. You did not cause the system of capitalism to exist in this world. You just live in it, okay? Now, if you've voted for Trump, do feel bad. Feel bad about yourself. Go to a Catholic confessional. I don't care if you're Catholic or not, and confess your fucking sins. But other than that, it's not your fault.
Should I feel bad for paying for my PS5 Pro by embezzling the lunchroom money? Should I feel bad about that, Jonathan? I mean, I can't afford that shit on a teacher salary.
I mean, Sean, you and I both know that we went to high school with, there was a person at our high school who got arrested for embezzling money. So
Yes.
maybe don't joke about that, Sean. To be clear, Sean Chapman has never embezzled money.
Yes, I have never embezzled money from the lunchroom or anywhere else.
All right, I feel uncomfortable here. All right, what else to say? Okay, then there is the issue of the game prices.
Yes.
Switch 2 game prices are all over the place. Mario Kart World is $80. The Switch 2 edition of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is also priced at $80, although if you already own, you would not be paying $80 for that upgrade. That's $10 over its price on Switch 1. The new Donkey Kong game is $70. Breath of the Wild Switch Edition is $70, which is also $10 over its Switch 1 edition. Street Fighter 6 with all of the DLC is only $60. The Bravely Default Remaster is $40, which is the same as its original 3DS versions. So there's a lot of like variance here. It's hard to draw any fast and solid conclusion. It seems like the standard price for Switch 2 games is $70, but then Mario Kart World is $80. we have it's very hard to know what they're thinking overall. Like, how much does the fact that they're bundling Mario Kart relate to them pricing that at 80? Who knows? This is weird. There's also been a lot of bad disinformation out there. Like, there are some territories like the UK where it looks like they're going to be pricing physical games £10 higher than digital, but we do not have any indication that is happening in the US. I've seen some people throwing around that Mario Kart World is $90 in the US. That is not the case. Again, anything could happen now. Right now, like, for instance, if you go to GameStop or Best Buy, they are listing it at $80 for a physical copy. There has been no indication from Nintendo that that is not the case. So there's things we are unsure about, there is active misinformation, and there's things that are just confusing. Where do you want to start with all that?
Yeah. Well, I think part of this is, like, the way this information got out there was incredibly chaotic and not controlled by Nintendo in any way, which I think you can understand on the one hand, because I think there's a sense of, well, we don't want to give everybody the bad news at the end of our direct that it's going to be expensive. And so they didn't put the price they very, like, noticeably did not put the price information for the games or the console in the direct. It just kind of ended, and I think everyone was like, oh, okay. And then again, I experienced this as, like, oh, I'm kind of getting little snippets during passing period because I was at school working, just getting, like, random little updates of, like, people investigating, oh, well, this game store in France has this priced at this, and that would be this in dollars, and it's just the way that, like, it all came out. And that there's such a weird variance to the prices that there are games that are $80, but there are 3 different reasons that games are $80. Either it is $80, it's $80 because it's $10 more expensive because it's an upgrade, or it's $20 more expensive than the Switch One version because it's an upgrade with some DLC. And so it's like, there's such a madness to the pricing that I think that the thing that has caused the huge backlash, that caused the very silly gamer rage of drop the price in the live stream or whatever the next day, I don't think it's the console price. I think it is the game pricing. Because if I'm putting on my classroom management hat, the thing that causes a class to go out of control most reliably is when there is a sense of like a fickleness or a lack of fairness to the way that rules are being applied. And there is no reason that Nintendo gave us, but I can't fathom a reason for why Mario Kart World is more expensive than Donkey Kong. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why. I don't understand why. They haven't given an explanation for why. And I think that creates this sense of, like, they're trying to rip us off. Because it's like they're trying to get away with it, is what this one game is more expensive feels like, which Nintendo has also done one time before with Tears of the Kingdom. And I think that was what triggers, like, the gamer rage. It's what, like, incites them. And I understand being, like, really perplexed and kind of just confused by what the fuck is going on with the prices, because that's how I feel. I don't understand why Mario Kart World on its own is just $80. That's fucking confusing as shit. I don't think an appropriate response for that is to bomb a live stream and yell, don't drop the price in there. I think that's a thing that a child would do. But I understand being, like, disconcerted by the way the pricing is laid out, because it is disconcerting.
Yeah. Because, and the Tears of the Kingdom thing, though, is also different because that was up to 70, which at that point had become the industry standard for Xbox and Sony. So, like, that felt kind of shitty, but it was not like they weren't pushing the overall pricing envelope for the industry. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And this would be pushing the overall pricing envelope. Because you said you can't fathom the reason. I can tell you the reason. I don't like this reason, but I can tell you the reason. It's because Mario Kart 8 is the 5th highest selling video game in the history of the medium, with 76 million copies.
Right, yes.
And if you take Wii Sports out of the equation, which is the 3rd highest selling game of all time, it is the best selling Nintendo game ever made. And Wii Sports is that high because it was a pack-in. Nintendo did not make money on Wii Sports directly. They made a lot of money on Mario Kart 8 directly. So Mario Kart 8, and again, there's also been rumors that GTA 6 is going to try this. Like, that has been pretty widely reported.
Well,
and
that was an analyst had a, like, fever dream about, like, well, they could just do $100, and everybody just kind of reported that as though that was like that is not a rumor. That is like an analyst saying that that's a thing they could get away with, and then people reported that as though it was a rumor. That's just a thing that has bugged me when I've seen that just be repeated online.
Okay. But like, let's put it this way.
Yeah.
If Rockstar does this, it would be the same logic there. It would be the logic that this is something that exists outside the normal market parameters and people will pay more for it. So that is the idea. I do think Rockstar would have an easier time getting away with that as an individual publisher for one game that is out on multiple systems than something that is your launch game for your new system. It does feel like the $80 thing, like, whatever more Nintendo would make on that, I think the PR price is bigger. I think you just eat it and say, we're moving Switch 2 prices to $70. I don't like $70 game prices any more than the rest of y'all, but it is the industry standard at the moment. So, like, that would be, if you were complaining about that, that would make you feel like kind of a loser, because that would just be, it's the same thing that PlayStation and Xbox are doing. But the 80, with nothing else being 80, is what's weird.
Yeah, and as I said, like the only explanation you can come up with is they feel they can get away with it. Which even if Rockstar does do that with GTA 6, I feel they have an easier excuse, because it's like, well, their games are like more expensive looking, they feel more prestigious, they only come out now every fucking once a decade, you know? And it's like they are the most expensive fucking video games to make. And so like I feel like they can hide behind that in a way that, like, if James Cameron has Avatar movie prices higher than a regular movie price, you can kind of understand it, because, like, well, this is the most expensive looking fucking movie I've ever seen with the effects and all the bullshit, right? But Mario Kart, not to say that this makes it a bad game, because I don't think it makes it bad, but it's the racing game with the cartoon characters. It doesn't look like it's, like, so crazy fucking expensive to make that I just can't understand. Like, look at the ray tracing and the, you know, it just doesn't have any of that kind of shit. So it's like if, I don't know, DreamWorks tried to like upsell you on whatever their like Shrek 4 or something, or Shrek 5 is going to be, you know, like it doesn't feel like a product that is premium in that way. So it's like it in particular being 80 just feels gross, because it does feel like the justification for it is we feel like we can get away with it on Mario Kart in a way that our 3D Donkey Kong platformer might not quite get away with. But that then also opens the question of like, well, you know, are you going to make your next Zelda game $90 then? Because you feel like, well, we can maybe get away with that one being even more expensive. Who knows? It's the inconsistency. It's the fickleness of it. Again, I think is what has caused the intense reaction to it, because it feels like the Wild West all of a sudden. It felt like there were rules in place. At one point, that rule was $60. Eventually, that rule changed to $70. I don't know if the rule is $80 anymore, and I think that's scary.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's weird because there is the bundle. And like, again, I feel like if you're buying a Switch 2 at launch, you're not going to be paying $80 for Mario Kart, because you're going to get the bundle and pay the $50 premium for it.
If you can get the bundle.
If you can get the bundle, yeah. Now, the bundle is a digital code, so it's a little different in terms of, like, scarcity, so we'll see how they do that. Like, I was also thinking, like, here's a thought experiment for you, Sean. Do you think the sticker shock would have been more or less if they'd announced a single SKU, every single one of them came with Mario Kart World, and it was $4.99?
Yes, and Mario Kart World was not $80. Like,
okay.
Like I think if Mario Kart World on its own was $70, it was a $4.49 console, and Mario Kart was packaged with it. I do not think you would have the reaction that is out there right now. I definitely don't think that, because I just don't think that that's what's causing it. I don't think the 450 is the reason why that's happening.
Okay, here's my prediction. I do wonder if when we get whatever revised pricing they're doing for the tariff announcement, if one way they soften the blow is say Mario Kart World is $70, at least for the digital version, because there is no manufacturing cost to them to lower the digital version. At least. Like, there's no tariff. There is a tariff justification for Mario Kart World on a physical cart being $80 because it's made in Mexico or other parts of the world, and there is going to be a tariff import cost on that. But for a digital release, at least, like, it would not, because Nintendo has done price adjustments ex post facto before for things, like the 3DS being the most obvious. Like, I do wonder if that's one way they like try to like make the medicine go down easier, is because again, it hasn't come out yet. It would not cost them anything to adjust this, 3 months before launch.
Yeah. I do wonder though if like some of the motivation for the $80 is also because cartridges get more and more expensive.
Yes.
I don't know if we know what the relative memory of some of these games are. I know that the maximum card, I think, has been reported is 64 gigabytes is the most
It's what
memory.
CD Projekt Red is using for Cyberpunk, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious how that affects pricing for stuff, like if maybe that's one of the things that they've accounted for. Now, that doesn't, from the consumer end, that doesn't feel like it should matter, because that's not like exposed to you, and we're not used to that being a thing that affects game prices. It used to in the 90s with like the Super Nintendo. But it is a thing that like I don't think the consumer is willing to accept that explanation, but I wonder if that is part of the explanation, but I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. It does look like in some territories we're going to have a split between digital and physical game prices. Here's the thing. It's never, ever made sense for digital games and physical games to cost the same.
Yeah.
There's a different cost delivery mechanism. Like, it does just in fact cost more to make a physical game than a digital game. I mean, it costs nothing to deliver a digital game other than the existing infrastructure of internet and stuff. But like, that's a built-in cost. Whereas manufacturing does have a cost associated with it. Now, there's different, prices. Like burning a Blu-ray disc for Sony is not the same as making these cartridges for Nintendo. But like, if we do arrive at a point where they do decide to price digital lower than physical, I honestly would be fine with that, because that would actually, on an economic level, make more sense to me. Like in a deep part of my soul would make more sense to me, because I always feel like I'm getting ripped off a little bit when I buy a digital game, because you can do less with it and it costs the same. And I've always thought that felt wrong. And I'd be curious if that's one way they mitigate for the tariff situation. Also, they make more money on digital games. Yeah. Even if they drop the price $10 between them, you would be making more money on that sale than you would a physical game sold by a third-party retailer. So, like, the reason not to do that has always been partially relationships with brick-and-mortar retailers. But it's 2025, and Trump is destroying that. Like, maybe that relationship doesn't matter so much anymore.
Yeah. Although I feel like if that happens, though, you could basically kiss physical games goodbye. Like, I think that's like the final blow. Obviously, Nintendo has retained a physical game audience more than PlayStation, and then Xbox, like, physical is just fucking dead with them. Like, their physical sales last time we got exposed to those numbers were fucking paltry. But I feel like if you are like crossing that Rubicon and just saying straight up, no, digital games are cheaper, and the fuck off GameStop, which hey, the GameStop can go fuck off, but all other stores as well that sell these physical products, they can go fuck themselves. We are going to be undercutting them. I feel like that's a big push that they absolutely could do. It would just be a really big shift in the industry.
It would, but that shift is going to come.
Yes,
one day. It is going to come. And here's the thing. I'm not convinced it would be the full end of it, because, people have been predicting that with movies forever. And yeah, the status quo is that movies, it is more expensive to buy a movie physically on a disc than it is like to stream it or to do a digital rental a lot of the time. And physical runs for movies are just much smaller than they used to be. It's moved to a lot of boutique labels. That can happen with games. We've already seen the start of that with things like limited run games. I think there would just be more boutique labels like that. I think Nintendo would be doing smaller production runs. I think physical games would probably be located more at the level of buying from the publisher themselves, like Nintendo, which is all stuff that, again, we've seen happen with physical media for movies and TV shows as well. And I don't know. I also think that might just be a necessary price correction in the future, if for no other reason than to help combat the problem with rising prices in games that might be leading people to buy them less. Like, I think this is something that's going to happen one day. If this is the inciting incident for it to happen, it would not surprise me. These are the conditions by which that would happen.
Yeah, I will point out, I think the thing that is very different between this situation and movies is that for video games, they need to include an ability to put physical media into their game box, which is a thing that Xbox is not going to do with their next console. PlayStation probably will with their next one, but it might be an additional add-on you have to buy, like what they've done with the disc drive. The question would be if that's the move that Nintendo makes, does for the Switch 3 or whatever the next console is, do they bother to even include a cartridge slot if that is such a small part of their market, and including that cartridge slot makes their console more expensive to manufacture? Like, that's to me the big difference between video games and the movie industry in that regard.
No, and it's totally true, but I still don't think that changes the fundamental thing of, like, that's where these markets are going. Sure. These things are going to happen. And again, I am not saying this as an anti-physical media person. I hope you all know that about me by now. But even for video games, I do, when it comes to AAA stuff at least, like, I do own more digital Switch games than I own physical Switch games. But if you take out, like, small digital-only games, like first-party Nintendo games or big third-party games, I definitely own more of them on cartridge than I do digitally. For my PlayStation 5 and 4, I definitely own more of them on discs than I do physically, or digitally, because I can get them cheaper, because I like being able to lend them out to friends, all of those sorts of things. But again, I think the virtual game card thing is one way you might see them teeing up for a future where they rely on it less. And if one day that price differential goes away, that would also be a reason to, like, move you away from physical media. So we shall see. This is a bigger conversation. Do you also want to talk about the interesting thing of how they're pricing this in Japan, Sean?
Yeah, so this was, again, like, a part of, like, the whole song and dance of people figuring out the pricing. There was one phase of it which was like, it's fucking so cheap in Japan. Like, what's going on? Maybe the prices are wrong everywhere else. It's like, yeah. Oh, no, but there's a super expensive one in Japan. What the fuck is happening? And so I kind of tracked that down. And I think one part of the story that a lot of people did not include, which is in their, like, what's happening with the price of the Switch in Japan, is that a lot of people weren't looking up the price of the original Switch, which bugged me. So I looked that up and laid it out for myself because I was trying to understand what happened. So the big thing that, like, was people were, like, going, what the fuck's going on, is that Nintendo, for the Japanese market, announced that the Switch 2 was going to cost 49,980 yen, which would be the equivalent of $330, because the yen is incredibly weak right now, which is one of the reasons why these prices are all funky from our perspective. But that one, that obviously is, like, relatively speaking, over $100 cheaper than the one in America, is a Japan-only one that's effectively region-locked. You could only use a Japanese eShop account on it, and it could only access Japanese-language video games. So it is therefore, like, obviously, to combat that if you have a super cheap version of the Switch 2 in Japan, well, then everyone's going to fucking scalp the shit out of that and just buy them up and sell them everywhere else. The way that we know happened to the PS5 in Japan, where there's a huge, like, scalping operation of buying up cheaper PS5s in Japan and selling them in places like China. They then announced alongside this Japanese-only Switch 2 that if you were, someone living in Japan who maybe does not speak Japanese or for whatever reason does not want to have a Japanese-only console, there's an international version of the Switch 2 in Japan, which is 20,000 yen more. It's 69,980 yen, which comes out to about $480. So it's in the ballpark of the price relative to, like, most of the rest of the world, including America. So that's obviously a huge price differential. Now, a thing that's important to keep in mind is that the Switch is already way cheaper in Japan, relatively speaking, than everywhere else. So the Switch 1 is 32,978 yen, which is about $226, and the Switch OLED is 37,590 yen, which is about $258. So if you look at the yen prices on their own, like, the jump from the Switch OLED to the Switch 2 is about the price jump. It's about $100 jump that the Switch OLED is to the Switch 2 everywhere else. So relatively speaking, the Switch 2 is not cheaper in Japan. It is just, you have to adjust your understanding of the market, because obviously that is the domestic market for Nintendo. They want to protect that market because they also basically own the entire market for video games in Japan for all intents and purposes, and have for over a generation at this point. That they want. This is,
like, just so people know, like, Nintendo gets a lot more of their business from Japan than Sony does, yes, for instance. So, like, they are much more protective of that market than Sony is, even though they are both technically based out of Japan.
Exactly. So it is cheaper from our perspective, but domestically it's the same relative jump in price. So like, I just wanted to lay that out because I've seen people talk about this in a way that I think they kind of misunderstood what was happening there, as though like, oh, well, they just made the Switch 2 super cheap just for Japanese people. Like I saw someone like be like, they're racist or whatever. It's like, no, there's a lot more going on here than that. It's like, you just need to understand that the yen is in a very different position, and that because it's their domestic market, Nintendo can do this in a way that would not make sense in other places.
Right, and they will not be going through the same tariff shock with their Japanese market.
Exactly.
So, yeah. All right, well, with all that out of the way, do you want to go through what was actually in the Nintendo Direct and just talk about the different announcements? And maybe with all of that behind us, we can just try to focus on, in an ideal world where we could all afford these, what we would be looking forward to or not?
Yeah. So the actual thing, the thing that Nintendo wanted everyone to be talking about, and everyone was talking about for about 5 minutes before everything went insane, what was actually in the Direct?
So they started off showing Mario Kart, which is the launch game for the Nintendo Switch 2. It is called Mario Kart World, because I think they did not want to go through the problem of, do we call it Mario Kart 9? Do we pull a Windows and call it Mario Kart 10? It's Mario Kart World. All of the flying and water gliding stuff from 8 is in this, but now there's a lot of new mechanics. You actually see Mario doing a wall jump in his cart at one point, which seems cool. There's day and weather conditions. You can go off the racetrack and drive everywhere in the course. And in Grand Prix mode, the courses are even linked as one big world that you can drive between in the races. Instead of loading into the next one, you drive to the next course. There's a whole free roam mode where you can explore the world. There's a photo mode in this one. It does look like characters will have all sorts of different customizable costumes. The race roster has been increased from 12 drivers per race to 24. So it basically looks like Mario Kart mixed with some inspirations from stuff like Forza Horizon, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's, Mario Kart 8 is such a, full-fledged, perfect version of what Mario Kart had been. I was kind of curious, what the hell do you do to make another Mario Kart look new? And I like all of this. It looks like a very fun, reinvigorated version of Mario Kart. I like some of the crazy things they're doing with characters. You can play as the cow from Moo Moo Meadows, and Moo Moo Meadows is my favorite Mario Kart track, so I'm into that. In any case, this is going to be a launch day game. It'll be in that bundle, and they're going to do a direct for it, just this game on April 17th. Or at least they said they would. Who knows now?
Yeah. Maybe they'll turn the chat off.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
So that's Mario Kart World.
It's interesting, they're doing the open world thing. I'm not a big Mario Kart guy, so it doesn't necessarily appeal to me, but it's an interesting change. I liked Mario Kart Double Dash. I'm a weirdo because I like going to a friend's house and playing Mario Kart Double Dash. I wish that they would finally just make Mario Kart Triple Dash and just put 3 fuckers on there. Let's do it. Let's upgrade it. But there is a phenomenon here that this, coupled with the thing that happens shortly after this with the camera and the C button and all that stuff, there is a certain phenomena of watching this that takes me back to the late 360 period, because the open world stuff here very specifically is similar to that generation of open world racing games. I think it's Need for Speed Most Wanted, I want to say, is that Need for Speed game. But those Need for Speed games at the end of the 360 generation had the it's open world, but you're racing you're driving from the end of one race to the beginning of the next in a series of races. The way they showed the way the Grand Prix worked is that game. There's just something that was interesting about, this is it is an open world racing game, but it didn't look like they were pitching it the way that current open world racing games are designed. It feels like early open world racing games, more in the vein of a Burnout Paradise or a Need for Speed Most Wanted, which I thought was interesting.
I mean, it makes sense to me because Mario Kart, you still want to have the, races where you're trying to get in first and all of that stuff. And I feel like this is an attempt to kind of blend that with other sort of trends. And it looks successful at it. It also, there is, you can tell, a pretty big graphical boost. This looks nice. The music is really good. The music got really good for Mario Kart 8, so I'm glad to hear that continuing, all this live instrument stuff. In any case, that's the first thing they showed. Then they showed off the new Joy-Con controllers, and they specifically talked about the C button on the right Joy-Con, which we've all been wondering about. What it does is it basically is a launch button for game chat features. Game chat is basically a kind of party chat built into the system. The system itself has a microphone on it. It's a little different than the PlayStation 5 puts the microphone on the controller. This is on the device itself. It is a directional microphone that's supposed to work even if it's across the room, but obviously it's the Switch, so they had to plan for it working on the system and if you're playing it handheld. So that's the idea, that mic can be used. I assume you can use other mics as well. It has a game sharing mode to share your screen with other friends. This game shares about 3 frames per second, but it like roughly shows you what other people are doing. You can also chat while playing. It's basically like, it's not a revelatory thing, but it's clearly Nintendo trying to do a party chat or really a Discord kind of chat scenario in a sort of way that makes you feel like it's a little local multiplayer-esque. There's going to be a camera add-on that you can buy that I believe is $30 that allows you to add your face to the screen and do video chat. Some games like Mario Party are going to build in your camera feed next to your characters. Switch Online will be required for all this, but only after the first year. It will be free until March of 2026. So this is their attempt to kind of add a more fulsome party feature set into the system. It didn't do a whole lot for me, but I will say one of the most interesting things I saw when that same day, when I went in to teach and I was talking to my students and they had all been looking at the Nintendo stuff. This is one of the things that interested them, because people like 10 years younger than me grew up playing on Discord with a lot of this stuff and these kind of features, and they were excited to see this built into the system. So I've never really played games that way, but, Nintendo always has to be a little careful about how they do any of this because they're under much more scrutiny because of the family stuff, right? And so this seems like their answer to it. Again, not the reason I would be buying a Switch 2, but it also does not look offensive.
No, I mean, it's another one of the things that it felt like, right, yes, like it reminded me of when the PS4 was announced. The PlayStation has had its like camera peripheral all going all the way back to the iToy for the PS2. But the PS4 pitched it of like, you can do video chat stuff. You've got the like Playroom or whatever. You can live stream, right? And so this felt like Nintendo finally kind of doing that sort of thing. I am curious. I mean, it's interesting to me that like some of your students are talking about them being interested in it being built in. Like, is the thing I've observed with like a lot of my kids is that my kids meaning my students is that they would just use their phone. They would not use an inbuilt console thing. They would just use their phone in the systems they've already adopted. So I'm curious if like this is actually going to see wide usage amongst that generation, if they see an advantage to really using it on there. But they're so attached to certain, whether they're on Discord or whatever, like, ecosystem they're in, they're just like, they're on that shit all the time on their phone, whether they're playing games or not. And I'm curious to see like what like if they find like much use for this functionality. I did find it funny though that like after all the incredible speculation about the C button, like if you followed some of this shit online, people came up with the most insane theories about what this like mysterious C button, because it was like the only thing that people who desperately wanted there to be some insane gimmick for the Switch 2, it was like the thing they were holding on to. It's like, yes, the C button, it's going to, I don't know, it's going to make coffee for you. I don't know, what's the word that starts with C? And it's a chat button, because of course it's a chat button. Like, it's which is fine. They should have a built-in party chat feature. It's totally fine. And a button accessing it, that's a totally good idea. But it is not like a revelatory, the industry will never be the same because now you can get into party chat.
Yes. All right. They also showed off a new game share feature, which is basically the triumphant return of DS download play. It means that if you have a game that has like local multiplayer and you want to play it with friends, but you don't want to make every friend buy a game, you can run that one game on multiple systems for multiplayer, and those can also those can also be used in like online game chat scenarios, and it will work across Switch 1 and 2. I love this. I was always bummed that there was not a like updated version of this after the DS, because that was always cool on the DS, where if like I had Mario Kart DS but my friend didn't, we could still play Mario Kart DS multiplayer, and I'm glad they're doing something with that again, because that is good. Then they showed off the system itself. It's a bigger screen. The system is the same thickness. The screen is now 7.9 inches. It's still 13.9 millimeters thick. The screen has gone up to 1080p from the original 720, and it goes up to 120 FPS instead of 60 with VRR, as we said earlier. They called it a Vivid LCD with HDR support. The whole screen, much better than we had kind of anticipated. The Joy-Con, as we knew from leaks, now attach magnetically instead of with the rails. The SL and SR buttons, which are the ones on the side where the Joy-Con Joy-Con attach are much bigger, and they are part of the magnetic pairing system because they are made out of metal. The control sticks are bigger. There are now, as we had been rumored, mouse controls on the Joy-Con, which basically means they have a sensor like a mouse does, and you put them down on a surface, and you can do tracking that way. The speakers on the system are improved. There's a built-in mic for voice chat. There's a 3D audio system, because everybody is doing some kind of 3D audio system now, whatever that means. Sometimes it means nothing. Sometimes it's kind of cool. It depends. There is a new stand that freely adjusts, similar to the OLED model, but it is not as sort of big and bulky, so it'll probably be a little easier to use. It has 2 USB ports at the top and the bottom. The one on the top, they showed off one use case is that you could use that to connect the camera, but it also means that you can charge it in either position depending on how you're playing. It has larger and faster storage. Here was one of the other big surprises, is that this now starts with 256 gigabytes of internal storage, which is 8 times that of the original Switch, because the Switch launched with 32 gigabytes and has kept that. The OLED is 64. That is still quite a boost. It is also faster storage now. The dock can output 4K and HDR. It also has Ethernet built in and USB. Remember, the Switch 1 did not have Ethernet. That was only added with the OLED model, so that is also a thing that is carried over. The dock also, this is a huge change, has a built-in fan to enable higher performance when docked. So it has active cooling for the system when docked. The Switch 1, in both the OLED and the original incarnation, just relies on the cooling that is inside the handheld device itself. And it is backwards compatible with games both physically and digitally because the cartridges are the same size and shape.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I feel like we talked
any
already
reactions
about,
to all that?
Yeah, we talked about like the big things with the screen. I do find like the memory number interesting, just like, as I'm curious how big these games are going to get, if you're keeping in mind that these are like PS4-ish size games, right? Like for like a little bit more than PS4 is kind of like between PS4, PS4 Pro. That's kind of the power range you're talking about. It makes me wonder if you're getting particularly into the third-party games. I don't think Nintendo is going to put out some crazy like 100 gigabyte monstrosity, but presumably Microsoft's going to put Call of Duty on this thing. I wonder how big Switch 2 Call of Duty is. I wonder how quickly you max that fucker out and got to go get a micro SD card. There should be sane game prices, but there are going to be some games that are not going to have very sane game prices, is going to be my guess.
Yeah, so I mean, here's the thing. Like, on the Switch 1, we did see that a lot of games that were very big on other systems were big in part because they were just making no effort to compress the data, and you could compress the data pretty efficiently without losing a ton on the Switch 1 in certain cases. In some cases, you could do it and you could definitely notice it was compressed. But like, CD Projekt Red, it sounds like Cyberpunk is going to be about 64 gigs. That is a major reduction over its size elsewhere. So, I assume it'll kind of be in line with what we saw on Switch 1, which is to say it'll be bigger than before, but maybe a similar ratio to like PS5 games. Does that sound right?
Yeah. I'm just curious to see. I just want to see who fucks it up. I just want to see what game company, and it's going to be Call of Duty, just puts
It's going to be Call of Duty.
Something that's just, you look at it, you're like, what the fuck are you even doing? Like, how did you already max out 250? It's like, I've got Call of Duty installed on my console, and then I've got 20 games installed on my external memory, because that's how I have to set it up.
Indeed. So, yeah, and just to jump ahead in the direct a little bit, again, they talked about the game cards. They're the same size as before, but they are red now. They have faster storage. The other detail here, and I think we expected something like this would have to happen, but because of the because of the speed of the data, internal storage expansion now needs microSD express cards. So normal microSD cards will not work anymore. And so you'll need those. They're more expensive. They'll presumably come down in price over time, but these are the more updated, faster microSD cards. Again, at a certain point, you just can't run off of, microSD is a standard that was created a very long time ago. So I understand that, even though I do wish I could keep using my current 1 terabyte microSD card in my Switch. And they will have a system transfer feature as well from Switch to Switch 2. I hope it's a good one. Sometimes these from Nintendo work. Sometimes it's like the Wii to Wii U that I have. There's a whole old podcast segment of me talking about that because it was a nightmare.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's the same. When we moved up to the series in PS5, you could use your hard drives, I guess, for PS4 games, but you needed SSDs to run the new stuff. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and we don't have a detail on that. I would be curious. I would love it if it would let you run Switch 1 games off of an old kind of micro SD, because I could use that, and then maybe have a separate SD that I could just plug in for Switch 2 games. That would be really cool, but I think we would have to get our hands on it to know if that will work. All right. There is a new game developed to help show off the hardware. It's called the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. You basically run around and explore the body of the system itself. You can read about different details of the system and its design, and it has different mini games as well. Very, very clearly inspired by Astrobot and the way it sort of encourages creativity about the mechanical engineering of the system. But although it launches with the system, it is not free. We do not know the price. It could be cheap. It could be expensive. We don't know. But why this is not just a pre-installed launch game is confusing.
Yes, I think this is one of the other things that set people up to be angry about the price of things. Is there's something particularly funny about it being called the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, because that sounds like it's a free thing. That does not sound like a game, right? Astro's Playroom, that's the name of a video game. You know, you see the thing, you're like, okay, this makes sense, it's your packet or whatever. Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, like if you were at Target or whatever in the game section, like, I need to get the kid for Johnny, what am I going to buy? The Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. That sounds like such a fun gaming experience. Let me go buy that. I probably assume that there's not going to be a physical version of this. I assume it is only digital. But it's just like, Nintendo Switch 2, welcome. Now pay up, motherfuckers. Like, it feels like such an own goal to charge for it. And it is funny that, you know, a lot of the other pricing stuff that clearly they didn't want to like mention, like the game stuff, was nowhere in the direct, but they did include this detail that you have to pay. They didn't have to say that. They could have let that detail just sort of sneak out there, hidden amongst all the other madness, but they did actually throw that into the Switch direct, and I thought that was funny.
It was funny, so who knows? We'll see about that.
Are you excited?
That is another one where
Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour? Or you got your credit card already for that one?
If I have to pay for it, I'm not buying that thing. But if it's free, I'll play with it. And I will say that is another prediction I have, that when they make this announcement of price, if they have to like change the price upwards for the tariffs, my prediction is the price of Mario Kart World comes down and this becomes a free pack-in. I think that is an easy thing for them to do.
Yeah.
So that is my prediction there. They showed off the Switch 2 Pro Controller, which is an updated version of the existing Pro Controller. It's got the C button. It also is the first sort of like mainline standard system controller we've seen that has back buttons built in. Now, it's hard to say what is like the standard controller for Switch, because technically that's the Joy-Con, but this is not, while this is like an $80 controller, it is not the same as the PlayStation Edge or the Xbox Pro controller, but it does have the back buttons built in, which I think is interesting. It does also have an audio jack this time. The Switch 1 Pro controller did not have an audio jack, so I'm glad about that. One nice thing, though, that we did learn, I think, after the show is that other controllers will continue to work. So your Joy-Con for Switch 1, you cannot attach them to the Switch 2, but you can use them wirelessly as controllers. You can still play with them, and your Switch 1 Pro controller will still work. Most accessories will still work. So if you don't want to shell out for the Switch 2 Pro controller on day one, you can continue using your Switch 1 Pro controller, and you're fine. I am very glad that that is the case.
Yeah, so that's very good, because the accessories are pretty expensive, right? Because what are the Switch 2 Joy-Cons? Do you remember off the top of your head?
They're 90. They're 90. That's only $10 more, because the Switch 1 Joy-Cons are 80. But yeah, they're 90, and I think the Pro controller is 80, and it used to be 70. So it's a $10 bump with all of that.
Yeah, so it's nice that if you've already, I mean, obviously if you have an old Switch, it came with Joy-Cons. So if like you're playing Mario Party or whatever, well, you've got 4 Joy-Cons right there. You've got your Switch 1 Joy-Cons, you've got your Switch 2 Joy-Cons, there's your 4 Mario Party people. So that's nice.
Yep. Yeah. Then they showed off the launch date. I guess we haven't said this yet. It's going to launch on June 5th. Maybe. They've said they're not changing the launch date, but we just don't know. That is the mantra today. We do not know, but they're saying June 5th. Then they were trying to explain basically what types of games you play on Switch, and they broke this down for all the parents in the room. There are 3 types of game. Switch 2 exclusive games, compatible Switch 1 games, which is most of the library. They did put out a list of ones that they've tested that are having issues, which is a nice bit of transparency. On most of those, they say they're investigating. I think a lot of them, I saw one of those was like the Mega Man Legacy Collection. Capcom will fix that. That is a game that runs on every system on Earth. I assume Capcom will figure that out.
Unfortunately, Jonathan, I don't think there's any way for you to play Labo VR on your Switch 2 and relive that experience. That was not on the compatible list.
Sean, when I moved, I threw that away. I was like, do I sell this? Do I? No, you know what? It goes in the trash. I'm moving. I don't need to move this. So that's gone. All right, and then finally, there will be Switch 2 Edition games. Games released on Switch 1 but have improved visuals and features. And just to break this down, this is all extremely similar to how Sony handles it on PS5, which is that PS4 games have just some built-in improvements that are free. And they even said there's some games like Super Mario Odyssey that will just have a free patch that will unlock some more power, a la like God of War had a PS5 patch that you didn't pay for, but it unlocked some stuff. But then Sony also has some games that they do, like they usually call these their remastered editions that are like a $10 to $20 upgrade. I think Ghost of Tsushima was $20, Last of Us Part 2 was $10, depends on the game, and those have additional either content or features added for the PS5 version. That's exactly what Nintendo is doing for this. Instead of calling them remastered editions, they're calling them Switch 2 editions, and they showed off stuff like Mario Party Jamboree, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Mario Party Jamboree and Kirby will both have additional like gameplay elements, like Mario Party will have new mini games, some new features. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is getting what's essentially a new DLC campaign called Star-Crossed World, whereas Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are just straight up better running versions of the games. Those are getting higher resolutions, frame rates, plus HDR, all of that stuff. So very much what you would expect. This is a case where it looks like Nintendo has actually been paying attention to the competition, because it is so similar to how Sony handles it. And I think that's good, because I've definitely, one of the fun things about the PS5 has been getting to play PS4 games in much better quality, either for a small upgrade price or for free, and I'm glad to see Nintendo doing the same thing with the Switch 2.
Yes, yeah, this all seemed smart. There is one additional feature, though, talking about me being reminded of 2013 in the video game industry. They did talk about how you can access your Zelda notes with your app on your smartphone. So if you want to relive that smart glass experience from like Dead Rising 3 or whatever, or Need for Speed Rivals on PS4, which had an app where you could like control a drone or some shit. If you want your second screen experience, it's back, baby. It's Zelda notes. There's notes and there's like a map if you want to use your map on your phone.
Yes. So there you go. I think the thing people are actually interested in is 4K 60 Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which is what I will be paying the upgrade price for. Actually, I don't need to pay the upgrade price. We also learned this later. If you have the Switch Online with the expansion pack, the $50 a year version, all of those are free. So if you own the game, you just get the upgrade while you have Switch Online. That's a nice feature, and I think that's a cool value add for Switch Online. They did also show off Metroid Prime 4 and Pokemon Legends ZA as cross-gen games, the Switch 2 version having higher resolution and frame rates, and this is where they specifically pointed out that Metroid Prime 4, you can choose, and this has to be the first time a Nintendo game has given you graphics options, right? It is either 4K 60 FPS or 1080p 120 FPS. The Switch 2 edition also allows for playing with the mouse controls, and in hands-on, journalists have shown that that's actually is not even something you have to go into the menu for. You can just put the Switch, while you're playing, you can just put it down on the table and use it as a mouse, so you could play the game mostly normally, but if there's something you feel like you need a little more precision for, you could do that, and that feels like a cool way to work in that feature. So,
yes,
there you go.
But there was something that just felt weird about watching a big Nintendo presentation and them being like, and you can play the quality mode at 4K 60 or the performance mode at 1080p 120 frames per second. I'm like, oh my god, Nintendo, what happened? Please refer to something else as the Metroid Prime 4 video game for the Nintendo Switch 2 console. Please give me your weird Nintendoisms again. I'm feeling uncomfortable. You're talking about frame rates and resolutions. What's happening?
They then showed off another first-party game that looks to be, I think this is basically the ARMS of the Switch 2. This is Drag X Drive, which is wheelchair basketball, where you push the wheels with the two Joy-Con as mouses, and then you point and shoot and all of that stuff. Again, like the same way ARMS was just all the Joy-Con things, but in sports, this is basically all the Joy-Con 2 things with a form of wheelchair basketball, which I do think is a cool idea for a video game. Like, that is not a kind of sport that you usually see represented in a video game, so that's neat.
Yeah, and the control thing it makes sense. Like it looks so
Yeah.
intuitive because like the logic of it applies so directly with the two mice, because there's just like the idea of having two mice is a very interesting concept, because that's just not, there's no other video game device where the idea of having two mice is like your primary control input. Obviously, technically, you can plug two mice into a PC, but I don't know of any video game that has ever done something with that idea. And most operating systems do not account for like that as two separate, distinct inputs. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if you get any other kind of smaller scale games. Like, I don't assume that Nintendo is going to like make that a major thing of like a big Nintendo game, because obviously you couldn't play that handheld. You'd have to, maybe there's a control version where you can use the joysticks or something instead of the mice, but it's clearly made for the mice. So you have to play it in a very particular way, but it's cool just because there's no other games that have used that control input before.
Yeah. All right. And then we got to sort of third-party game extravaganza. Elden Ring was the first thing they showed. That very much felt like a statement of intent of like kicking this part off with Elden Ring, which is the Tarnished edition, which, I hope it runs well. Otherwise, that's going to be a really easy way to make fun of that. It didn't look like it was running poorly. It looked fine.
Yeah, it looked like Elden Ring, but I did laugh at them calling it the Tarnished edition. I'm like, I understand because I played Elden Ring, but man, like nobody else would try to sell a product as the Tarnished edition of this product. Like let me go, you know, I don't know, I'm gonna go get a meal at McDonald's. Let me get the Big Mac Tarnished edition. I want a tarnished Big Mac, please.
They showed off Hades 2, which I'm very excited for. Hades 1 was obviously very popular on the Switch. That's where I played it, so it makes sense. Hades 2. Street Fighter 6 from Capcom. It'll have a standard version and a version with all of the DLC from years 1 and 2. And they're putting out some Street Fighter 6 amiibo, so that's kind of fun. They showed off the new Daemon X Machina sequel. It's called Split Fiction, and we did learn later that is also coming to PS5, Xbox, and PC. The EA is doing their sports games on the Switch too, so Sports FC and Madden NFL, so those will be on there.
I don't think that's the subtitle of Deus Ex Machina 2. I think Split Fiction is its own. Yeah, Split Fiction is the new game by the Brothers A Tale of Two Sons people, and A Way Out in all those games. That's okay. Like, I was like, I feel like Split Fiction is something else, isn't it?
Daemon X Machina does have it. So just so everyone knows, I was writing these notes on my phone because I had left my laptop at my office. Okay, the sequel is called Titanic Scion. Okay, that doesn't sound that different. But yes, Daemon X Machina is 2 is called Titanic Scion. Split Fiction is a different game that I don't very much care about. Hogwarts Legacy is getting its Switch 2 upgrade, and they did point out, because the big thing with Hogwarts Legacy on Switch 1 is that the world had to be divided up a little bit, so there's loading screens in between like Hogsmeade and Hogwarts, and now it'll just be like the other versions of the game. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4, that remaster, which is not out anywhere yet, but that'll be like a PS5 game. That'll be on Switch 2. They showed off Hitman World of Assassination, which is the name for the like combined Hitman 1, 2, 3 game. And that's Project... What was that developer called?
IO.
IO also. So they showed off Hitman, but they also showed off the first look at their James Bond game, Project 007. I think this is the first footage we've seen from it, right?
Yes. Well, you know, footage. It was like the James Bond logo or whatever with like the inside the gun barrel. I was actually very excited, thinking like, oh my god, are we finally going to see? Because they've been in development of that game for a long time, and it was more just a like reminder that it's happening. I'm very excited for that game. I really want to see what it is.
But anyway, that's going to be on Switch also, and that combined with the Tony Hawk announcement made clear that we are going to have some like PS5, Switch 2 games day and date. Like this isn't just games that are a couple of years old. Then Square Enix showed off an HD remaster for Bravely Default, the classic 3DS game. It'll have some new mouse-controlled minigames, but that is coming on launch day, and it will be $40, which is nice. Bravely Default rocks. Bravely Default 2 is a Switch game, but Bravely Default 2 is the third Bravely Default game because there was Bravely Second, which is a 3DS game, and we don't know if that's coming to Switch because Square Enix is fucking weird.
So it's Bravely Default, Bravely Second, and then Bravely Default 2, and now like and then Bravely Default, the HD remaster of Bravely Default that is not titled anything else.
Yes.
Great.
Then we had RGG Studio show up. All our favorite devs are here, Sean, showing off Yakuza 0, the director's cut, which will have presumably some visual improvements as well as newly added cutscenes. That is coming on launch day. Have we heard if that's coming to anything else, or is this just on Switch for now?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think they've said if that's coming anywhere else. Obviously, Yakuza 0 is available on like the regular versions everywhere. I thought it was interesting that they said that it's Yakuza 0 because some of the older Yakuza games have slowly been coming out on the Switch. Like Kiwami is out on the Switch.
Kiwami 1 and 2, I think, did, yeah.
But I would have expected them to do the like more of the Dragon Engine games just because you assume that those are like the more like I would expect like Infinite Wealth or one of those that are more intensive that maybe would be harder to port to the Switch 1. Obviously Yakuza 0 is the best Yakuza game, so I have no qualm with them putting out anywhere else.
It's also the easiest starting point for people, right?
Yes.
Like just to like if they want to like get people into Yakuza on Switch, this is the one they feel like is the best place to start. I mean, I have not played 0 yet. I do own it on PS5. Depending on the price, that might be a fun thing to pick up for me because I want to go back and just do the whole series. So we'll see. If it's like a $50 edition, I have it on PS4 and I'm fine. But if it's like $20 to $30, I might do that.
Yeah, because I'm just looking through, and none of the Dragon Engine games, which is everything from 6 on in the Judgment, none of those are on Switch 1, because I just assumed they felt that was too much of a porting effort. So, so I assume that eventually they will bring those over as well, because there's absolutely no reason why the Switch 2 could not play any of the Dragon Engine games. So, they're just starting with 0, I guess.
All right. Then they showed off a new Koei Tecmo Zelda game. So this is basically the sequel to Hyrule Warriors, Age of... I forget what the first one was called. I'm sorry. Age of Calamity. Which Age of Calamity is a game I liked the idea of because it was the Breath of the Wild art style, but it was a Dynasty Warriors game. But the Switch one, it was like a 20 FPS game. It did not work well. It's like one of the only times I have... like returned, I forget if I returned it or I sold it, but I got rid of that game because the performance was too poor. I have a pretty high tolerance for that. I played all of Pokemon Violet. I was fine. But the thing about Pokemon Violet is that if the frame rate's low, I'm selecting commands in a menu. It's like not the end of the world. With a Dynasty Warriors game, 20 FPS does not cut it. So I am glad they're taking another run at it because this is a cool idea. I like the idea of Dynasty Warriors with the really beautiful Breath of the Wild art style, and that's what they're doing here. It is doing specifically, I love this idea. This is Zelda's side of the story from Tears of the Kingdom, where she gets sent back in time. So it's from her perspective, and then the different warriors are the different people she meets there and her, presumably. So this should be cool. I think this running on like much more capable hardware could be a very fun game, and they're saying this comes this winter.
Yes, it is a cool like narrative idea. I am curious. I feel like they have to find some way to justify you getting to play as the more well-known characters. Like, I can't imagine that you don't play as Link at some point in this game, because that would just be crazy. Because there's just something about being like, it's Hyrule Warriors, and then here's Zelda and, like, the two big, like, animal-looking people from the flashbacks. I obviously never finished Tears of the Kingdom, so I never have a lot of attachment to them. So I was just like, can I play Sheik and Link and, like, the like, big characters I think of when I think of The Legend of Zelda.
Here's my prediction, Sean. This would be actually fucking great. She finds, like, Link's ancestor, who looks exactly like him, but it's just like Link's great-great-great-great-granddad, and she gives him a sword and has him help her out. Honestly, there's no reason in Zelda lore you couldn't do that. No. That would be fun.
I mean, there's like 100 fucking Links all over the place, obviously. It's like they just keep popping up. So, yes, that is a good point. There's no reason why you just couldn't be an older Link and just say, it's Link, whatever. Yeah.
Then they talked about Nintendo Switch Online will obviously continue on Switch 2, and the new membership benefit at launch will be they are launching GameCube games. So finally we are getting the GameCube app. We currently have the NES, Super NES, N64, Game Boy Advance, and then the Sega Genesis. So this will be the next one of those, but it is for the GameCube. The 3 games it will launch with is Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, F-Zero GX, and this one is cool, Soul Calibur 2. Soul Calibur 2, obviously a great classic fighting game, but the GameCube version of it was beloved because it had Link in it. So you will have the GameCube version of Soul Calibur 2, which if you play like the Soul Calibur 2 HD remaster that came out for like PS4, that does not have Link in it because it was not that version of the game. So that's cool that that's there. And it's got all the same features as the other Nintendo Switch Online apps. It'll have suspend points, customizable controls, all of that. And some of the ones they showed off that they are adding in the months to come included Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, which is a big deal because that is like the most expensive GameCube game to go out and buy. Obviously, you could emulate it, but if you wanted like a physical copy, that one is like impossible to get. And they will be selling a GameCube wireless controller that will be available in the Nintendo Store on launch day. That's actually kind of neat because all of the other like Switch Online controllers they've sold really can only work for Switch Online games. But the GameCube controller has all the buttons you need for Switch. They've put on like a ZL, it's got a C button on it, so you could use that as your primary controller if you wanted. So that's actually kind of neat.
Yeah, that is cool. I'm glad that the Soul Calibur 2 is there, because that was just, it was such an unbalanced selection of guest characters, because you had Heihachi from Tekken on PS2, it's just like fine. You had Spawn on Xbox, it's and then you had fucking Link on the GameCube. It's like,
yes.
Jesus Christ, like I guess maybe it was because it was I was going to say it's because it's an M-rated game would be why they wouldn't do Master Chief for the Xbox One. But no, because it's fucking Spawn. There's no more character M-rated than Spawn.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they didn't do Master Chief for the Xbox version. It has always haunted me that they went with Spawn, a character that has no connection to Xbox other than that they're both edgy. But that's such a weird... Yeah. It's like they're video games on the Xbox you could have pulled characters from. And when Dead or Alive 4 came out, they put a Spartan in Dead or Alive 4. So it's just one of the great mysteries. But now finally you can fucking play the good version of Soul Calibur 2 again.
Yes. They showed off Deltarune, which is the new game from the Undertale guy. That'll be launching on Switch 2 with I guess that game's been in early access, releasing one chapter at a time, but it'll have all the way up through Chapter 4, which is new. Borderlands 4, they showed off, will be launching with the other versions on Switch 2, so that'll be day and date. They showed off Civilization 7 from Firaxis, which does make use of the mouse controls. That feels like a obvious use case for those. And that'll be a launch game. I think Civ 7 is already on Switch, but this is a Switch 2 edition. 2K had WWE 2K and NBA 2K. Then the stream broke and it froze for a while, and then the audio got behind. Nintendo's streaming is usually pretty rock solid, so that was surprising to all of us. But anyway, I was able to backfill. We also got the Cyberpunk 2077 announcement. That'll be a launch day game. Square Enix showed off Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. Interesting, they did not show off Rebirth. I assume that'll be coming too at some point, but we're just getting Remake for now. That's the PS5 version of Remake with all the extra Yuffie stuff.
Yeah.
Showed a bunch of sizzle reel of third-party games that I did not get all down, but basically, if it runs on the PS4, and probably if it runs on the PS5, they're trying to put it on Switch. Lots and lots and lots of stuff. Their next game was their last third-party title, and this was one of the coolest announcements, because this was a brand new FromSoft game that is exclusive to Switch 2. It is called The Dusk Bloods. It is coming in 2026. It is directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki. And from a later interview with him, we learned this is a PvPvE multiplayer-focused title where players select from a wide range of playable characters with unique abilities and load into matches. And then there are different objectives to accomplish, including personal objectives like killing a specific player in the match who is your rival, or assisting a specific player, and there's a lot of unlockable elements as a form of progression on each character, with these also incorporating the FromSoftware style lore. So it's not exactly like getting a new Bloodborne or Souls game, but the trailer was great, and I'm not always into multiplayer stuff like this, but if Miyazaki directed it, I will give it a try.
Yeah, it's like, when this first was announced, I was like, oh shit, do I have to buy a Switch 2? But then, announcing it being a multiplayer game with, distinct matches and stuff, makes me much more of I'm curious to see what it is. If it seems really awesome, maybe I would end up getting a Switch 2 at some point to play it, and then obviously other stuff. But it went from oh god, do I have to actually now try to plan how would I buy this thing? To me being I'll wait and see. And obviously it's also not a launch day, it's a 2026 game, so I'm curious to see more of the specifics, but it being a multiplayer thing does not make me kind of champ at the bit for it necessarily.
Yeah, I probably feel the same way, but if it's that team, I'm always willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. In any case, the next announcement was probably my favorite of the day, which is that Kirby Air Ride, one of the coolest, weirdest GameCube multiplayer games, is getting a sequel. It's called Kirby Air Riders. It is the next project from Sakurai himself, the Smash Bros. Guy. Kirby Air Ride was one of his games as well, and it is coming this year to Switch 2. They didn't show a lot, but Kirby Air Ride is one of the most, weird, unique things Nintendo ever made, and I've always wanted to see them do more. What could you do with today's tech? And, I'm just always happy when Sakurai gets to do something that isn't Smash Bros, because his soul is yearning for it all the time, and I'm glad he gets to do it. I will be there day one for this one.
Yeah, I kind of wish that they'd gone further with this and had made it look like it was going to be a trailer for Smash Brothers, but then it's a trailer for Kirby Air Riders, and Sakurai comes out and it's like, come on, please, just let me make this fucking game, guys, okay?
Yeah. And then the last trailer was a new 3D Donkey Kong game called Donkey Kong Bonanza. It looks like it is trying to be Donkey Kong 64, but good. It is a big open-world exploration title. He can climb, he can pound through the earth, he can rip up rocks and punch shit. And he also has a new design for the first time basically since Donkey Kong Country, because the 3D Donkey Kong in Country that Rare created and then updated for 64 has basically been his model for the last 30 years. And this is much more harkening back to the 2D illustrations of Donkey Kong from the arcade era and the NES. If you look at the sides of arcade cabinets or the instruction booklets, and I thought that was neat because I like the Rare version of Donkey Kong that you get in all of those, but you can always update him, and I thought that was a really fun looking design, and I'm excited for this game. And you corrected my spelling because it is not Bonanza as you would like the show with Clint Eastwood. It is Bonanza like banana.
Yes, the show with Clint Eastwood, which is a common reference point that everybody our age would definitely get.
But Sean, Bonanza was the longest running live action show in American TV history. I think people know what Bonanza was. If you go to Pluto TV right now, it is the main show on their landing page, which I learned over the weekend, which I think is fucking funny.
Yeah, so, Pluto TV, everybody's favorite streaming service. I'm going to go into the classroom on Monday. I'm going to be like, hey, I'm going to just use that as my reference point rather than Shrek.
Sean,
or Minecraft, Bonanza.
I read an article in the Hollywood Reporter this week. Bonanza made it back into the Nielsen top 10 because so many people watch those because Pluto is one of those free ad-supported services. So many people are watching those that Bonanza is back in the Nielsen rankings, which is fucking funny. So no, my reference is not that old. Fuck you.
Yes, it's not old. It's because it's in the Nielsen rankings.
It's coming out July 17th. And will be $70.
Yes.
All right.
This, I will say, this was the most interesting game to me. I thought this game looked cool. I'm not a big 3D platformer guy, but I am a big just punch the shit out of everything guy in a video game. And because it was if you've seen the old Red Faction games on the PS2 that had that geomod tech that would just deform the terrain. It looked like that, where he's just punching holes in the ground and ripping shit up. I'm curious to see how what you design out of a whole game like that, because I think that was sort of the Achilles heel of the Red Faction games, is that technology was more interesting than anything they could build around the technology. So I don't necessarily think that guarantees this is going to be a great game, but it's a cool pitch to just be and you just punch the shit out of everything and it just explodes and rips up. You just and there's a very tactile look to that looked very cool. So I thought it was a big surprise. I was sure that the one more thing at the end of this was going to be a 3D Mario game. And so it being a big Donkey Kong game I think that's pretty cool.
Honestly, it was more exciting to me than if it had been a 3D Mario game, because I love 3D Mario, but Mario is not underserved. Donkey Kong hasn't had a game of his own since Tropical Freeze, and I love the two retro developed Donkey Kongs, Country Returns and Tropical Freeze. Those are two of my favorite Nintendo games ever made, particularly Tropical Freeze. But Donkey Kong hasn't really gotten to be in a different kind of game other than Donkey Kong Country. There's been the Mario vs. DK, but that's more of a harkening back to arcade Donkey Kong. There were the Jungle Beat games on the GameCube with the bongo controller, but obviously those are a little hard to play now for obvious reasons. And so it's just cool that Donkey Kong is getting his moment in the sun with a new 3D platformer, kind of like how when Kirby got Kirby in the Forgotten Land. Mm-hmm. That was so cool. That's one of the best recent Kirby games. So I like this as especially as a launch window game. That seems awesome.
Yeah, very cool.
So again, all of that, I was more than ready to plop down $450, really $499 with Mario Kart in the bundle. I would be happy. Like, this looks awesome. And honestly, I was going in, as much of a Nintendo fan as I am, I was a little more hedged because I knew the number one game I want to play this year, Metroid Prime 4, would be on Switch 1. And I really like my Switch OLED, and if it was going back to like an LCD screen, there were a lot of reasons I was like, maybe I don't get the Switch 2 the first, moment I can. But after this, I was very much sold on it. I'm very excited for it. And then, just like he has ruined everything in life, Donald Trump took a shit over all of it. Yeah, I fucking hate that man. I hate him so much.
I wish that Donkey Kong would punch the shit out of him and make him blow up.